I'll do the invocation and then start the pledge. First of all, I'd like to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. So with that, we may rise. Dear wise and loving Father, first let me say thank you on behalf of all those who are gathered here today. Thank you for your many and abundant blessings. Thank you for life itself, for the measure of health we need to fulfill our callings, for sustenance and for friendship. Thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work and for the honor of bearing appropriate responsibilities. Thank you as well for the freedom to embrace you or the freedom to reject you. Thank you for loving us even so from your boundless and gracious nature. We ask you to guide our work today to help us rejuvenate the Brunswick-Glynn County water and sewer systems. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay. At this time, Commissioner Harvey and Ms. Barnett and Superintendent Riles, we have a retirement to recognize. Mr. Gary Keith Campbell.
I'm glad to be here today to celebrate the retirement of Mr. Gary Keith Campbell. Next to him is new Superintendent Mr. Riles, Mr. Alvin Lane. Oh, I guess I am. These are people we have worked with since being here, working for North Sewer. And he's worked tirelessly and done a great job. There's a certificate that goes along with the award that's been presented to him by Miss, I don't have a name, Cindy. Cindy Barnard.
Here, congratulations.
The certificate that goes along with it says during the period January 2nd, 2013 to November 30th, 2018, Mr. Campbell was employed with the Brunswick-Glynn Joint Water and Sewer Commission. You were assigned as with the Operations Division as a lab analyst, as a Class 1 on-site operator. With keen sense of responsibility, you perform your assigned duties, meeting all expectations of your supervisors. Over the period of your service, you further enhance your value by constantly applying yourself to learning the new technologies and procedures introduced throughout the various wastewater treatment plants. You were proficient in various assignments to meet the changing needs of our division, the Division of Water and Wastewater Division. Additionally, you perform your duties in a manner as to bring credit to this division and to the Brunswick-Glynn Joint Water and Sewer Organization. Your attendance, along with dress and appearance, displayed personal pride each and every day. Your cheerful countenance and easy manner during austere periods and during demanding operational commitments were a huge success to this division and to this organization. As you depart and as you retire from service of the Brunswick-Glynn Joint Water and Sewer Commission, it is with sincere appreciation that we congratulate you on the job well done. It's signed by Jimmy Johnson, the Executive Director, Andrew Burrows, Deputy Executive Director, and Mr. Mark Riles, Superintendent of Academy Wastewater Treatment Plant. Thank you, Mr. Riles. Thank you, Mr. Lane. Cindy, thank you. And sir, if you'd like to say a couple words, you can. We enjoy having you. Thank you.
Mr. Campbell, countless times when he was going through chemo, whatever the case may be, he still wanted to be there. But, you know, some things that, you know, he was not able to do. But he was still faithful to his organization. And I thank him for that.
Keep up that positive attitude, Gary. All right, keep it tight. There you go.
Only the best comes to GWSC.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
thank you. The minutes are provided for you, and if you want to pass out the executive minutes, and when someone's ready to approve the minutes, I'll accept it.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes from the December 6, 2018 regular meeting. Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the minutes? All those in favor of approving the minutes, please raise your right hand. And the minutes are approved. You now have the executive session minutes. When you're through reviewing them, I'll take a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to accept the minutes from December 6, 2018 executive session. Second.
Is there any discussion, questions? If not, all those in favor of approving the motion, please raise your right hand. The minutes are approved, 7-0. Thank you. Okay, the first item of the agenda after the minutes is the audit presentation. Mr. Donahue.
Commissioners, David Irwin was originally scheduled to be here to present the audit. However, he's still recovering from the flu, so instead we have Grant Davis from Malden and Jenkins here to present the audit to you.
Okay. Hi, welcome.
Hey there, appreciate you all having me. I'm assuming at this point you all have received the financial statements. Do you have a copy of them
Yes, we do.
in front of you? Okay. Well, there should be 3 deliverables, so to speak. One of them is the actual audited financial statements, the thicker of the 3. One is what we call our auditor's discussion and analysis, got a little picture on the front. And the third is a management letter with our letterhead on the top. I'm going to spend the majority of my time in the actual financial statements. Just to give you a little background, the auditor's discussion and analysis, again, that's the medium-sized of the 3 packets, has a picture on the front. This is required communications. The AICPA, our regulatory body.
Hold on, what picture you're talking about?
What's that?
Is that a picture on the front?
Oh, you don't have that one? Okay.
Oh, okay.
In the email though, right? That was in the email?
Okay. Well, you didn't miss a lot. It gives a brief synopsis of the year, financially speaking. It also includes some required communications that we have to make to you all. And I'll just go through them now since you don't have them in front of you, but it's things that.
Can we get copies of it though? Sorry.
Okay, you're fine. Anyway, it's things like we're independent of the commission. We had no disagreements with management and performance of the audit, items of that nature. And again, at the very end, it talks about some upcoming accounting standards that could have an impact to the commission in future years. And just a brief synopsis there. But as I mentioned, I'm going to spend the majority of my time in the financial statements, and I'm just going to refer to some page numbers as I go through. The first item, strangely enough, does not have a page number on it. It's about 3 or 4 pages in. It's our independent auditor's report. It says that in bold letters across the top. The second page of that report offers our opinion, which was unmodified, and I know that doesn't sound very glamorous, but that's the best such result that you can get in a financial statement audit. Good result there. Following that, given it on page 3, is the management's discussion and analysis. This is written by management and provides a comparison for the prior year, so 2017 as compared to 18, and looks forward to next year in one of the sections towards the end. Talks about the initiatives of the commission, what to look forward to in coming year. If you read one section of the financial statements, I would recommend reading this part. Again, it provides that comparison 17 to 18. You see what happened in 2017 and then what happened in 18 and what changed. Just following that is where we begin the actual, what we call the basic financial statements. That begins on page 11 with your statement of net position, which is the same thing as your balance sheet. Just a couple of items to highlight here. Cash and restricted cash, about $29 million. And that's an increase of about $1.2 million over 2017. On the subsequent page, this begins with your liabilities. This is still the balance sheet, but just a continued portion of it. You all issued new bonds, 2017 revenue bonds that refunded your 2010 bonds. Looks like that was a wise decision. I think that was supposed to save you all about $6.5 million going forward. So you'll see the $34 million about middle of the page under long-term liabilities. That's those bonds outstanding, and that is net of a current portion, which is included just above of almost $2 million. Not a lot of change in the pension liability. I think that went up about somewhere a little south of $100,000 from 17 to 18. Nothing crazy there. It looked like a good investment year for the plan. So as long as the plan continues to make good money on investments and you all keep contributing to it as you have in the past, that number should remain relatively consistent. Shouldn't be much fluctuation in that from year to year. All that leaves us with net position or equity at the very ending there of $124 million, almost $125 million. You can see that there's 25, this is at the bottom of page 12. You can see there's 25 million of that we consider unrestricted. That does not equal cash on hand, but is a little less than actual cash on hand. Again, y'all had about $29 million in cash, so this factors in your assets less your liabilities. The biggest portion out there is your what we call the net investment in capital assets. These are capital assets minus the debt used to acquire those. So that's why that number is different than just your capital assets. The next page is the income statement. This is page 13. You can see operating revenues, $34 million. Operating expenses, 29, almost 30. It gives you a margin or an operating income of $4 million. That's a pretty strong number considering you had $7 million of depreciation expense. Just below that, the first thing that jumps out to me in the non-operating section is the SPLOST money, $4.5 million in SPLOST revenues in fiscal year 18, which is great. And then a change in net position down third line from the bottom, $7.5 million. Or an increase in net position from 117 to almost 125. The next page, page 14, is my personal favorite, the statement of cash flows. I wish it was my own personal statement of cash flows. Cash flows from operations, this is the first line that is underlined there, $8 million. That's a very, very strong number. Any statement of cash flows is important for any enterprise, especially a water and sewer commission, and to have operating cash flows, that strong number is a good thing this year. And that doesn't take into consideration your SPLOST money. That's without that. We'll get to that here in just a second. The next section you'll see is cash flows from capital and related financing activities. These are purchases of capital assets. When you see that first big negative number, that's where you spent $7.5 million on capital assets. That's also a good thing. If you refer back to your income statement, we had about $7 million in depreciation expense. Of course, assets depreciate over time. You added $7.5 million. So not that that's necessarily a benchmark for every year, but you did add more than was depreciated, which is never a bad thing, especially in terms of, again, water and sewer infrastructure. The biggest numbers in this section, you see a $36 million, a negative $37 million, and then a $2 million. These are all related to that 2017 bond issue. So we issued new bonds. That's the money coming in, the positive 36. We paid off old bonds, so to speak, negative 37, almost 38 million, and then we paid interest expense of 2.2 million, which is in accordance with the terms of the bond agreement. And the very last line there is that SPLOST receipts, $4.4 million. Overall, all these activities resulted in an increase in cash, as we mentioned previously. $1.2 million, taking you up to $29.4 million in cash. Again, these are all strong numbers. Page 15 is just a reconciliation of operating cash flows to operating income. Just shows you the changes in the balance sheet accounts and how that had an impact on the actual cash that you ended up with at the end of the year. Just after that, you get into the footnotes. There's nothing really new and interesting in the footnotes this year. Unless anybody has a specific question about a specific note, then I'm just going to breeze through that. The next item I wanted to mention begins after page 34. This is almost at the back. This is our, we call it our Yellow Book report. It's the second of two reports that we have issued. This one is not designed to offer an opinion as the first one was, but just to say that in accordance with governmental auditing standards, we audited the Water and Sewer Commission. And as a part of that audit, we had to evaluate or gain an understanding of internal controls over compliance and laws and regulations. And as a result of that, we noted no instances of non-compliance or other issues. And that is all culminated on page 36. You can see at the very bottom purpose of this report, and I won't read it to you, but that explains the purpose of this report. And then page 37 is just a general synopsis of the audit. So you can see it's just a recap of kind of what I've been over. Financial statement, type of auditor's report issued, unmodified. Again, that's not glamorous, but that's the best thing you can get. No material weaknesses in internal controls that we identified. One significant deficiency that is a carry forward from previous years. I don't know how long that has been a finding, but it has been a finding for some number of years. This is at least the fourth that I'm aware of. And then the last item there, no non-compliance. And then just below that, you can see the actual significant deficiency, and it is unchanged from 2017, which is noted on page 40. So with that, any questions on the actual financial statements? Yes, sir.
Yeah,
I got a question on page 9.
Okay.
It talks about the coverage that you need to have for debt service.
Yes, sir.
It's been 1.1, and in the wording up there, it says that the current fiscal year debt coverage ratio has been computed to be 2.95 based on total revenues and 1.97 on revenues net of connection fees. But down below, it looks like in the calculations, the numbers are 2.92 and 2.58. Is that a mistake?
I'm not sure.
That's a mistake. Those numbers weren't updated from the previous year.
So what should this be?
They should be the numbers that are shown below, the actual computed numbers.
So the 2.92 and 2.58.
2.92.
Those, the 2.95 and 1.97 were from the fiscal year ended.
So we got better coverage. Last year's 2.95 and 1.97, and that's 2.58 and 2.92. Is that right? That's
2.92 and 2.58 respectively.
right.
Sounds like a good
So
mistake.
we have real good coverage.
Yeah, sounds like a good mistake.
so do we need to update that in the final document?
We certainly can.
Back on page, are you finished? Back on page 37, where you were going through the summary of audit results, I may have missed it. The first item, internal control over financial reporting, material weaknesses identified, where there isn't nothing is checked, the yes or no.
That is a no.
So there should be a no
There should be a no.
in that box.
The opinion just prior to that described that I kind of went through there on pages 35 doesn't have a page number, but 36. We mentioned any issues. You can look at, if you look at the page just before 36, you can see the heading, internal control over financial reporting. That second and third paragraph would indicate if you had a material weakness in internal control there.
So can we get that updated as well?
Absolutely.
I know that this document doesn't stop here.
Sure.
There are other places it's going, so we'd like to have everything
I understand.
zipped up
Yeah.
before the state gets a hold of it, state auditor.
I don't think he'll actually get it.
It doesn't actually go to the state. The audit is submitted to the city and
the DOAA doesn't review,
So I was reviewing Georgia Code, Section 3681-7, item D, and it states that we'll send a copy of this report to the state auditor within 180 days of the close of our fiscal year, which is June 30th.
that would be a first, then.
It'd be before the first. It's 180 days after June 30th.
No,
So
talking about the first
If-
time we
first
do it.
time it
That's
ever
what
been
he
done.
said.
Commissioner, in the early years, we did submit those audits to the state, and they told us not to bother.
So they don't want to receive them anymore. So they're not applying the code.
They got enough paperwork.
Yes, sir. If DOAA reviewed this audit report, you all would get a summary of their review, and it would say whether there were any issues with compliance with state laws. You all don't get that because they don't do it. They don't look at these financial statements. Now, for cities and counties, they do, in school boards, school districts, they do, and state agencies, but not for entities such as this.
So this Georgia Code is state law, isn't it?
Seems so.
Yes, sir.
So aren't we supposed to be complying with that?
We can always call up DOAA and see if they want to resume review.
I'm not exactly sure which, you said you submitted to the municipal,
Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board,
that's a department of the state, is that?
no, this is federal, part of SSC.
Okay, well,
I can certainly forward them a copy this year.
we may be complying with it and we don't even know.
I just want to make sure we comply with the state law. I mean,
Well,
that's
y'all
what it says.
do these audits for,
About 100 of them, and we
Yeah.
don't submit any water and sewer audits to the state for DOAA review. Again, if they didn't get it, they'd let you know. If they wanted it, they would let you know.
So pages 3 through 40 were written by staff. Pages 1 and 2 were written by y'all. Said y'all do 100 of these. Is that pretty typical that?
Where are we at? Are we in this?
Actually,
Yeah.
three through 34. Yeah, I wanted to ask that
Okay, yeah,
question.
34, not 40.
Uh,
Go
three-
ahead then, please.
Is 3 through 30, I was reading, your independent auditor's report.
Okay.
The statement, management's responsibility for the financial statements.
Right,
I believe management must be our management.
right.
Right. So these statements, which I believe is 3 through 34, page 3 through 34, apparently that section was written by our staff.
Well, the management's discussion and analysis, which is page 3 through 10, is unaudited, and it is written by management.
By our staff.
Right.
Okay.
Everything else within the document is written by us, and management takes responsibility for our work in doing that. There are two ways that financial statements can be prepared. They can either be prepared, in this case, by John, or they can be prepared by your independent auditor. And we have to internally go through a checklist to determine whether our preparing your financial statements impairs our independence. And as a part of doing that checklist, we have determined that John has the knowledge, suitable knowledge, to oversee the preparation of financial statements and take responsibility for it. So again, we write everything but the MD&A, and then all of it comes together, and we process it in our office, and then print it out and bind it and send it to you.
Okay, so you wrote page 11 through 30.
I did not
Four
personally,
then.
but we did. Malden Jenkins did, somebody there.
Where's the section on the pension?
8, note 8.
Is that page 8?
No, it's note 8,
Oh, no,
I'm talking page 30,
page 30.
but 26 is where it starts.
So you wrote page 30 and 29 and, yeah. Defined benefit plan, pension plan, it begins in
27 is where it begins.
27. And so you selected the investment rate of return of 7.5% in
And so
that analysis?
I did not. Your actuary through GMEBS does all this.
We provide all of this information is regurgitation of what GMA provides.
Yeah, a couple factors at play here, and I don't want to get too down in the weeds with actuarial valuations, but this plan, the GMEB's plan, is administered by the Georgia Municipal Association. It is audited by an auditor that they select. So the plan as a whole is audited. It includes maybe 100 municipalities in it that all pool their assets, and then each individual employer is provided with an audit report and then an actuarial valuation. And I believe it's Kavanaugh McDonald or Siegel. Siegel is the actuary. So between the GMA plan as a whole, their auditors, and the Siegel actuarial firm, they give us all the information, this is copy and paste from all
Copy
their
and
stuff.
paste.
Right. I didn't determine any of the actuarial assumptions and methods because we're not actuaries.
Right, so that's what I was wondering about. I mean, that's pretty much this entire section from 3 to 34, I believe, is cut and paste.
From year to year, there's generally not a lot of change.
As opposed to something that your company, Malden and Jenkins, has actually done this analysis in that section, those sections, and presented those results. It's cut and paste. What you've done is you guys have given us the independent auditor's report, which is 2 pages in the beginning,
That's right.
and then you gave us, I believe there might be some at the end,
There's another report. It's the
another one at the
standard
end, which is a summary of findings.
Just before that is another report, our report on internal control over compliance.
Right, and then,
So 2 reports, 1 summary of audit results, and then everything else is financial statements.
everything else up through 33, from
I
3 through 34 is cut and paste. Either we wrote it, somebody else wrote it, and gave it to us, and we sent it to you, and you cut and paste. So, I guess what I'm getting to, I noticed a note that came from John when he was presenting this in the email. It stated this was a unqualified audit.
The new terminology is unmodified.
What does that mean, unqualified?
The new terminology is unmodified. It used to be unqualified, and they changed these every now and then. You got 3 potential results with an audit for the opinion that we provide, either unmodified, modified, or adverse. Adverse is the worst. Modified isn't good. Unmodified is the only thing that you want. We've issued an unmodified opinion, which again, as I mentioned at the very beginning, is not glamorous, but it's the best thing you can get.
Commissioner, I sometimes slide back in my age to previous terminology.
Right, it used to be unqualified, qualified, and adverse. Now it's unmodified, modified, and adverse. So they've just
Yeah.
changed the terminology.
I guess what I'm trying to figure out, because I started with the state code here to see what was it that we were responsible to provide. Why are we doing an audit? It's designated by the state that we have to do it, and that we're supposed to give it to them in 180 days. And there are 2 requirements in the audit that we're supposed to provide to them, that the audit's supposed to cover. I just wanted to ensure that those 2 items had been covered in this audit. And then there's another requirement in our operating agreement that we have an audit, an annual audit, but it doesn't specify what's going to be in the audit. It just says an audit once a year.
But there's not a lot of leeway in terms of an audit. They're pretty standard. There's not too many variations in terms of what anybody can issue in the form of an audit opinion. They are there's just not a lot of, we can't pick and choose what we do. These are all
Right.
set out by our professional standards.
So in this audit, you provide an opinion, and that is specified here in state law that it will provide an opinion of the opinion of the performing auditor with respect to the financial statements will be provided. But it also does say what you've already mentioned, and that is that we will provide the financial statements in accordance with generally accepted governmental auditing standards, but that any apparent material violation of any state or local law, which is why they want the audit. You know, they're protecting government funds and the use of government funds and that sort of thing. That any violation of the state or local law discovered would be identified by the auditor. I didn't see a statement of that matter, and I'm just wondering if no statement means we've met that requirement.
Our second report, the Yellow Book report that I referred to previously, I believe it's on page 35.
Is that this report?
No, sir. It's in this big packet, the financial statement packet. It begins just prior to page 36. It has our letterhead on it. It says Independent Auditor's Report on Internal Control over Financial Reporting and on Compliance and Other Matters based on an audit of the financial statements performed in accordance with governmental auditing standards. That is that report. If you had issues or instances of material noncompliance, whether it was with GAAP or state law or local ordinance, then it would be identified in this report, and it is not. So therefore, there is no noncompliance that we are aware of. And again, as I mentioned previously, this second report is not meant to offer you an opinion that you are completely free of noncompliance or internal control issues. It is simply to state that as a result of our testing, that we did not identify any instances of noncompliance.
So as I understand the opinion of this audit, what Malden and Jenkins has done in regards to the financial statements, page 3 through 34, that these items have been looked at in reference to the numbers appear to be correct.
They are materially correct.
Materially
That is
correct.
our opinion, right.
In your opinion, as far as whether the analysis that is shown here is prudent, that is not a part of your audit.
There's really not a lot of, the only analysis is in the management's discussion analysis, and I mentioned previously that's not audited. So we're not providing an opinion on any analysis anywhere.
Right.
We're providing an opinion on these financial statements, which include starting at the balance sheet, going through cash flows, and then the footnotes. And as a result of our testing, those items, those elements of this report are free of material misstatement.
So, right, and that's what I'm getting at. You're telling us, in your audit, you're telling us that the numbers are accurate, materially accurate. The plan of how the numbers are used, whether we have enough money for the construction program that may be coming, interest rates that we're earning or that we're paying or anything like that, you're not providing any opinion on any of that. That's management analysis, and that information that's in this packet, a part of your audit, pages 3 through 34, is boilerplate or cut and paste, somebody else's opinion, either audited or not audited, but not a part of your opinion. I want to make sure we're clear on that.
Right. There's very
Okay.
little analysis anyway in this whole document. The management's discussion analysis, even though it includes the word analysis, is not supposed to be subjective. It's supposed to state fact, and that's it. So
And
while
so-
it does offer some comparative analysis, where I mentioned 17 and 18 being compared, there's no analysis on the profitability of the JWSC, whether the rates that you all are charging are sufficient or not sufficient, or anything else. It's just simply a comparative discussion. That's probably the best way to describe it. And we don't offer an opinion on that part, but everything else is audited. And as a result of this opinion that we've gone through, is materially correct.
It's materially correct, and that's what is required by the state law, that it be audited to be materially correct. But then it's presented in this package as an analysis, and a person reading this package may come to the conclusion that our auditors looked at all of that information that's presented in this package and agreed to it, that this is all prudent. All of this analysis is prudent.
Well, we have done that. That is-
Materially, it's accurate.
Right.
If you use the 7.5% discount rate, you will, in fact, get cash flows that will be substantial enough to cover the outgoing cash flows. You will get a present value that will be substantial enough to cover the outflows. That's materially accurate. But the decision to use a 4.5% interest rate or a 9.5% interest rate, you're not commenting on that.
If it's in your audit report, we have deemed it to be a reasonable estimate. Again, that goes back to everything is materially correct. If we didn't think the discount was reasonable, then we wouldn't have issued this opinion. We'd still be doing your audit, trying to get with the actuary and either increase or decrease your discount rate, which we have done in the past. But this 7.5% is a very typical discount rate. It's the one that's used by every municipality that participates in GMA. So as a result, and of other deliberations, without having our actual working paper files in front of me, I can't spout off to you exactly why we think it is reasonable. But we do document that in our files, whether this rate and everything in this document is reasonable, if not materially correct. So there's varying standards. In our opinion, if you read it, goes through each one of these items that you're asking and provides a discussion on what we have done in issuing this report.
Do we know what the percent earnings were on the pension fund over the last 12 months?
As I mentioned before, well, I don't think I did mention this. You all don't have any right to any of the money that's in there. That's all in a trust. You can never be gotten out.
Right, but we do have to keep it funded so that we have enough money in there to make sure our employees, when they retire, have the funds there to cover their pension.
Well, that's up to you as a board. You don't have to. You can decide that you don't want to fund the plan anymore. You can terminate the plan if you want to, but that's a decision for the board. I'm trying to see if we've got a return here on the investments in there. I don't see one. You can see what your contributions are on page 34. There's some analysis relative to the pension plan on pages 34 and 35 that shows you the changes. Some of this is probably going to look like Greek. It's even hard for me to explain because it's all actuarial in nature. And it is an estimate, but you can look on page 33 and see how your pension liability has changed from 2015 to 2018. Started out at 1.7 million, now it's at 2.3 million. So, and there are a lot of factors that drive that number. Investment return is one, which is the equivalent to your discount rate of 7.5%. You can see pretty weak investment earnings back in 15. They're getting better, which is all reasonable considering the national economy. You can see what you all have contributed to the plan, which is the actuary of the plan tells you what they think you need to contribute to fund the plan. Obviously, it's not completely funded, or if it was, you wouldn't have a liability. But then again, there's not necessarily anything wrong with not having 100% funded pension liability. It doesn't look like, nothing about this plan looks scary to me. So any specific other questions about the pension plan?
Go ahead, John.
Go ahead.
I think a couple of months ago, I think I sent you all a copy of the actuary's evaluation of the plan, and it seems like I sent a copy of the audit along with the audit of the plan along with that. If I didn't, I'll go back and check my email, but I can forward that copy to all of you as well.
Yeah, the GMEB's plan as a whole, as I mentioned previously, has an audit done. And as part of that audit, they determined, since all the investments are pooled of all participants, again, 100 municipalities, their auditors split out the portion of the total investments to the participating entities. And as a part of that, in their financial audit, GMA's audit, they have information on the plan as a whole, the return on the plan as a whole, which would probably be a more appropriate way to look at it than just by one individual employer who may have significantly less money than, say, a city of Atlanta if they participate in it, or city of Savannah, or something like that.
Well, if we looked at, one of the reasons I had a question on page 29, where we have long-term expected real rate of return, and we're looking at the different asset classes and the allocation for each class. If you take those allocations and multiply it by the long-term expected real rate of return and come up with essentially a, kind of a hurdle rate, a weighted return, then it's significantly below 7.5%, which is the expected long-term rate of return specified here. But then, when the analysis is performed over here, 7.5% was used as the bogey, when on the previous page it was showing that we don't expect to get 7.5%. So on one side, we're saying we expect to get we need 7.5, and on the other side, we're saying we're not getting 7.5.
I guess
So
I don't really see that. It's breaking it up by asset class and giving you a long-term expected rate of return by asset class. So like, for example, domestic equities, it says will return 6.71% by themselves.
which is below 7.5.
Right, they're not supposed to be taken individually.
It's 45% of the fund.
They are aggregated together.
Right.
So all the returns for all the assets in the plan that are disaggregated in this table would be summed and will be over, in this example, be over 7.5%.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I think the part we're missing though is that these are net of inflation.
That is true.
So I think that's the missing 2.75. These are net of inflation.
Commissioners, if, what I would suggest is that if you have questions about all of the computations that GMA provided to Mullen and Jenkins to prepare these schedules, that we have the actuary from Siegel, who does the actuarial work for GMA, come here to answer those questions. The actuary is, his name is Rocky Joyner. He's actually originally from Brunswick. And he would be more than happy to come here and go over all of that, all of the particulars of these numbers with you at a later date.
I think that'd be a good idea. I guess what I'm wondering is, by our accepting the audit, I mean, if we have a board action today, which we're planning to do, and vote that we accept this audit, are we agreeing to the information that's included in pages 3 through 39 as well?
My understanding is that information that's been pretty much transcribed from GMA and their reports into the audit report. So these numbers would have passed muster with the GMA auditors and with GMA managers.
I'll give you another example. Page 7, at the bottom of the page, where it says interest income, funds are invested as permitted in accordance with Chapter 83 of Title 36 of the Official Code of Georgia, which establishes guidelines for local government investment procedures. And then the next sentence says, as interest rates have continued to decrease, so has our interest income. If that is boilerplate that's been cut and pasted, that's from years gone by, because I think we've had 7 rate increases, maybe 8 now, over the last 2 years. So certainly during the time of this audit, interest rates, that statement's not correct. It would have said, as interest rates have continued to rise, so has our interest income, which it has not. But that's just another example that I'm bringing up about the cut and paste and who wrote what. And if we vote to accept it, are we voting to accept everything that's in here, whether it's accurate or not? And that's why I wanted to know what was audited.
Well, again, this section, the management discussion analysis, is not audited.
Okay. So we prepared everything in here that's got your name on it, on this document. Is that correct, John? And it has errors in it.
Staff prepares pages.
Whose staff? That's the,
Staff, me.
all right.
I prepared this and then it was reviewed. I gave it to the executive director, deputy director, and other division heads to proofread this and look at the information that was in it.
Well, you know, I have to agree with Commissioner Copeland. I'm kind of, you know, stunned here that how much of this is our work, especially since there are mistakes in it. And that you're taking it and putting your name on it saying it's a unmodified audit.
Well, I don't know that there's anything that would change in what we've identified so far that would change our opinion on the overall audit.
Well,
In fact, I know there's not. Now, I certainly understand you want to be correct, and as I mentioned before, I don't have any problem going back and changing these few sentences around to reflect real circumstances. That won't take long at all, and we can, I mean, it's not gonna change your report date, or our opinion, it'd just be a new document with a clean
Well,
set of items.
I don't think that we're really going to accept the audit today with the mistakes that have been pointed out by Commissioner Turnipseed and Commissioner Copeland.
Did we receive this on November 16th? Is that when we received it? That's the date of the letter.
That's the date of the audit. We received them later, bound copies.
Okay. So around the 1st of December.
Yeah. We,
I think it was just.
When you received it, was there a presentation?
no,
No.
we actually, we were gonna have it the last meeting, but the individual who was supposed to do the presentation had, not then, he had a conflict of interest, and I moved it to this meeting to avoid the conflict of interest. And he got the flu.
Real quick, and going to the one with the color.
Sure.
Starting on page 12, you mentioned, commission's financial statements are the item cited as a significant deficiency. You've already talked about that. And then there's a couple of recommendations for improvement / management points in here. Talk briefly about those management,
Okay,
points, please, or recommendations.
Right, capital assets, this is pretty typical, but, especially as time goes by, entities that have capital asset records end up having some things that are vaguely described in their system, on their register, where it's kinda hard to identify what exactly, like it might say, building one, like, at this point, after turnover and stuff like that, who knows what building one is? I mean, this is just an example, it's not anything that we identified there. What I was just saying is, as a result of our review and audit procedures on capital assets, we noted that there are items in the capital asset register that are vaguely described like that. They're kinda hard to identify. If they're hard to identify, who knows if you still even have them or not.
Commissioner, just in the read-ahead package and just inside the cover of the audit report itself is a memorandum from staff in regard to the findings. And on this particular capital asset issue, where there are vague descriptions and so on, I included a copy of, or a screenshot of our depreciation schedules, where it shows I think it was the same, but it was 1989, and it says 1989 additions.
So
When
that doesn't-
BGJWSC was formed,
That's
we took,
what they're saying.
we were provided the depreciation schedules of the county and of the city, and we combined those into a consolidated depreciation schedule for our use. But that 1989 addition happens to be what came over in that depreciation schedule. So, and by the time we formed in 2008, that 1989 addition was already 19 years old. So whether the records existed for that, whether anybody's memory for what that addition actually was could describe what it was, is questionable at best. So we were to maintain consistency of the depreciation methods and years of life and so on going forward. We had to use what we were provided with in 2008, which is sometimes not very well described. From the time we were formed going forward, our assets are fully described in the depreciation.
It's typical of infrastructure too, where somebody just says, 10 miles of sewage pipe or something like that. I'm talking about, years ago, things like that. That's gotten better across the board, just from an industry perspective, as time has gone by.
Can you speak briefly about the other two?
Sure. The second item is a written policies and procedures manual. That's just, we've talked to John about this in years past, and this is really just a result of not having one big combined written policy manual in terms of financial reporting. I'm sure there are such things for other aspects of the operation, but for accounting and financial reporting, there are pieces of policies and procedures. They're not all centrally located, they're not all together, and they're not all necessarily up to date. So this is, the concept here is to, one, consolidate all that information in a actual written form and update it to today's standards.
And then referring again back to the staff memo in regard to these deficiencies that are noted, LaDonna Roberts, who was hired in September, has quarterly benchmarks throughout the first year of service, and compiling and documenting and putting all these procedures together in one book is part of her quarterly benchmarks.
The last item is inventory related. As a result of our audit procedures each year, we come to test counts of inventory at or around June 30th when the year end is. This past year, I think we counted like 50 items, which are selected randomly. And as a result of that, a few of the items that we selected to count were different than what we actually counted. So in essence, we're going in, say, to the warehouse, and there's 5 boxes of paper clips on the listing that we provided, and there are 6 in the warehouse, or there are 4, something like that. So as a result of our testing, there was some discrepancies in what was on the actual listing that we provided to do our counts and what was actually in the warehouse or wherever. So that's just saying that we need to implement controls to make sure that these items are, your perpetual inventory system is always agreeing. Now, you know, there are crazy things that happen, especially with, you know, water main breaks and things like that. People may come in the middle of the night and have to get stuff and do that. That's fine. I mean, we understand that. These items were not a result of that situation.
And referring back to staff's responses to that, inventory management has not been the sole responsibility of any one person. It's been incorporated into other people's jobs as part of their job. So in the spring, when was it, March, May of 18, 3 people were transferred from the System Pumping and Maintenance Division to the Purchasing Division and are solely responsible for inventory management. And we've also, we've talked to you before about barcode scanning, putting new shelves in the warehouses and so on to better organize inventory. So there are steps underway to correct that situation. Actually, those steps were put in place before the auditors actually started their work this year.
And the next 7 pages are titled Other Matters of Communication to the Board and Management. It says, during our audit of the financial statements, we noted other matters we wish to communicate to you in an effort to keep the commission abreast of accounting matters that could present challenges in financial reporting in the future periods. Is there anything you want to highlight in those 7 pages or anything that we need to look at?
The only big one coming up that's going to affect you all is GASB 87, which is on page 16. It's about leases. So up until this standard becomes effective, you got 2 types of leases. You got operating leases, which is if you're like for a copier, you pay monthly or however often payments for that. There's no balance sheet recognition in that. There's no asset or liability associated with that lease. And then capital leases where you actually have a liability associated with the lease on your balance sheet. What this standard is doing is there are not going to be 2 types of leases anymore. There's going to be one, and it's going to be, everything's going to be like a capital lease. So if you rent a copier or lease a copier, then at the date of that lease, you'll have to recognize a liability on your balance sheet for the entire amount of what those payments are going to be. And then as you pay it over the term of the lease, then that liability decreases. Same thing if you lease like a room in this building to somebody else. You recognize an asset for that at the day that the lease was entered into, and then a reduction of that asset as the lease term went by. So it's just giving balance sheet recognition to operating leases. May not even be significant. If there's not anything big, if it's just small copy leases and things like that, then it won't be a big deal. But I've talked to some water and sewer folks who lease space on top of water towers for like cell phone towers, things like that. And those can be relatively significant in the amount of money that they bring in, and would be a pretty big item to add an asset for a receivable.
So then you can count the full cash flow as an asset?
Initially, so if you all had a lease in progress for that type of situation, and at June 30, 19, for example, you had 10 years left on the lease, and it was $1,000 a year. that
Okay,
they were
but
supposed to
what if the lease that you have, and we do have this, but what if, what kind of contingency do you have when you have the asset on books and you're counting it as an asset for a termination clause where the person has 30 days to terminate the,
Well, that would be evaluated in what you record in as an asset. So
what is GASB gonna say?
they haven't issued the standard yet.
Oh,
So this is just letting you know that this is coming, and we've still got a couple years to go before implementation. I think it's 2021 that this is supposed to take effect. So we've got 19, 20, and then 21 before it'll actually be done. This is looking way forward, but some of these GASB projects, like you all may remember when the pension standard came out back in 2015, it was good to let people know several years in advance that this was coming. So that's our attempt here, is to keep everybody abreast of new standards, even though they may be several years off.
Is this document a part of the audit?
No, sir.
It's not a part of the audit report.
It is our required communications to you all, and then we add in some other stuff. So there's a section that begins on page 4. And page 4 are our required communications to you all. That, and then the management letter that we issued that I just went through, we're talking about the inventory and the written policies and procedures. We're required to communicate those to you all, our recommendations. And then this page 4 of this other document, things that we're independent, management's responsibility of the overall financial statements, as we've already talked about. The AICPA makes us tell you this in writing. In our effort to memorialize all this, we've created this packet that includes other information, so it's not a one-page thing.
So this packet is dated June the 30th.
That's the year end.
That's the year end. Do you know what the date would be when this packet was provided to us?
Same as the financial statements.
November 16th.
A couple weeks after the financial statements. Again, this is not audited. We're not offering an opinion on this. This is just us providing this information to you.
There's a lot of good information in it, it looks like.
Well, good.
There's information that needs to be considered.
Well, usually when I introduce this, I tell folks that if you have insomnia, this is a good place to start.
And when you started, you said there were 3 documents.
Right.
So I have these 2.
Okay.
And
the other one is the management letter, and this is the capital assets, written policies and procedures and inventory. We issue a separate letter. This is also in this document that we just went through. So this management letter, the 3rd document, is also in this.
That management letter is inside the audit report.
Okay, that letter.
And that, with the staff responses to the findings attached to it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
No.
Commissioners?
Be happy to answer any others as well. John has our contact information. Be happy to talk to you over the phone or email or whatever we need to do. If anything else comes up that you have questions about. And we'll get these typos fixed.
You're gonna fix the typos,
Yes, sir. We will.
okay? I don't see any reason to vote on it.
Well, can you,
What if they're gonna fix the typos for us?
yeah, if it's just typos, can we
Make that motion.
make a motion to accept the audit report
Contingent on the corrections?
on the condition that the issues are resolved and, verified by council or Council and Steve or somebody, but.
And verified by the commission.
Yeah, by the commission.
And we'll do it today.
Yeah.
And we'll get you another
Yeah.
electronic document. I know the SEC filing has to be by December 31st for your bond stuff. So we'll do that. We'll go ahead and get that today and get you an
Okay.
electronic version to submit to Emma or whoever.
The bond issue is a private issue, so it's not.
Okay.
Filing with Emma on that.
Okay. Well, we'll still get it to you today, and we'll FedEx maybe hard to get them to you soon with Christmas and all, but we'll FedEx the hard copies as fast as we can.
The opinion isn't gonna change.
Nothing is gonna change other than those typos that you identified. No dates are gonna change, nothing like that.
Okay, well, I make a motion to accept the audit report as presented with the exception of the typos that's been identified and discussed, and once those are corrected to the satisfaction of the commission, a full acceptance.
Second.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I just want to go on record, I wish we could have gotten this a lot sooner, so we could have reviewed it. I don't know why it took so long to get it, and before it even came to the commission.
When did you all get it? Just today?
This week.
It was emailed out a week ago.
Oh, okay.
We did receive it a week ago, and the package that we received was a package that included the staff's responses to the opinion or to the results. And by seeing that, we realized that the staff, that the audit that we believe was prepared for the Board of Commissioners, however, the staff had the opportunity to review the audit and comment on the audit and prepare their recommendations prior to our even seeing the audit.
Well, we have, interesting you bring that up, we do have some boards that like to get the audit as soon as it's available in electronic format via email without having to wait for FedEx or whatever, and we'd be more than happy to email each of you a copy of it as soon as it's ready. So theoretically, like with this document, it was dated, the opinion's dated December 15th, we could theoretically send you an email, an electronic copy of this on November the 15th, next year when it's done, and you won't have to wait on it.
That'd be preferable.
Okay. John, you need to make sure that that happens next year. Okay. Anything else? Any other discussion? I have a motion and a second. No other discussion? All those in favor of passing the motion, please raise your right hand. Motion carries. Thank you. Good analysis. Okay. Okay, approval of fiscal year 2019 budget adjustments. Mr. Donahue.
Commissioners, you have a memo for these proposed budget, requested budget adjustments. They fall into three groups. The first one being to revise the revenues, where the current year's budget was prepared using the rate structure that was in existence prior to June 30th. And the rate structure was changed July 1st to include 1,000 gallons of water and sewer consumption in the base charge, which caused some of the accounts to be a little bit out of incongruent. The second is to reallocate personnel costs, where, as previously mentioned today, staff from system pumping and maintenance had been transferred to the purchasing division, and some staff from the administrative customer service division has been transferred back to finance. That these adjustments move the wages of those wages and benefits of those people to the correct divisions. And then the third is operating costs, which are the miscellaneous costs that follow those employees, like some cell phone costs, some travel costs, and that kind of thing. Bottom line is we're just moving monies from one division to another to properly allocate those costs and to adjust revenues. There is no increase or decrease to the budget this year.
This doesn't have to be approved by the county or the city.
No, sir. The city and the county do not approve our budget. It's presented to them for their review and comment.
Of these, the personnel that have been transferred between divisions, are all of these positions filled, or are there any vacant positions here?
They're all filled positions.
Is it possible to get
org chart, I guess, so we can see exactly who falls where, you know.
Okay.
Get that out this afternoon, because we already have that.
It's actually on the website.
Oh, it is?
We can shoot that to you this afternoon.
Okay. Well, I can get it. Don't worry about it. I can get it. Just there.
There's no change to the budget.
No, there's
All
no
the numbers are the same. I'm ready to,
This
Pass
just
it is.
this just moves or reallocates the revenues in accordance with the existing rate schedule, and then moves the payroll, benefits, and ancillary costs from one division to another for personnel shifts.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion. I move that the Brunswick-Glynn County Joint Water and Sewer Commission amend the June 2019 fiscal year budget per the attached summary.
Second.
Second, okay. Any further discussion?
I have one question. Why is this called the June 30, 2019?
That's the fiscal year ending.
Did we always put the fiscal year ending on?
Yes, sir.
I've got one question. Are the water revenues exceeding the water expenses, and are the sewer revenues exceeding the sewer expenses? Or is one of them paying for the other?
I don't have that answer right off the top of my head. We'd have to combine some numbers from the,
You can provide that,
I'd
you
have
can
to do a
provide
little-
that in future, because we need to see, we hate for one to be subsidizing the other.
Your financial discussion today doesn't have it?
not that particular, not the answer to that particular question, no.
Okay.
That's not in the financial statements that are being presented today. It can be derived from the statements that you got in the read ahead, but I'd have to do the math on that.
Okay. No discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand. Motion is carried. I have a comment at this point. When Mr. Johnny Cason was a commissioner, he recommended several times that we set up a procurement division and that all procurements be handled by them. And we've been moving in that direction, and this is probably, once it gets completed, especially with the inventory management, which we saw has a problem, would have been something that Mr. Cason had recommended when he first came on the commission, and we're finally getting it done, so to speak. So, thank you. Okay. Now we're gonna approve, establishment of investment management accounts. What is this?
To expand that.
Okay,
Earlier this year, we established investment accounts for the operating reserve, which is targeted at 4 months of operating expenditures, and that money is just set aside in a fund. We've put that into an investment fund, and the monies that are held for customer deposits, part of that money has been moved to investment accounts. Mostly, it's all U.S. government obligations and agencies. We also hold large cash balances in the repair and replacement reserve, the CIF reserves, and the capital reserve, which aren't expected to be spent for some period of time. And we're asking the commission to authorize the establishment of investment accounts to effectively earn more interest on the monies that aren't currently needed, that are being held in those reserves. The second page of this, this is an example we went through with Key Bank, or with, BB&T Bank. The monies that are in deposit with BB&T earn credits in an account analysis that can be used to offset other charges and what it costs us for our lockbox operation, for other miscellaneous bank charges. As we decrease the amount of cash that's held in BB&T and move that to investments, those earnings on that, those earnings or credits decrease, so we will actually be paying out. Right now, we don't actually pay out anything in bank fees for those services. As we decrease the balances held by BB&T, we will have to start paying bank fees for some services. So this analysis goes through what we would be earning in additional interest and then netting the estimated bank fees from that to, so that if we went through this scenario on here, we would be netting nearly $18,000 a month more by moving those monies to investments, even though we are paying bank fees. Right now, our estimated monthly earnings with the investments we have is just over $10,000. By moving these additional monies and netting out the charges that the bank will be, that we'll have with the bank, we would be netting an additional $7,000 a month.
That's after paying the bank fees.
That's after paying the bank fees, yes.
This analysis, if I can ask you a couple of questions, are you finished? You ready for a question? I was trying to figure out that it states that this is on an $11 million reserve fund investment. Is that this analysis based on a nominal 11 million or what?
It's based on moving $1 million of the capital reserve, which right now is about 2.75. $6 million of the R&R reserve, and about $4 million of the CIF reserve from the existing cash accounts being held at BB&T to investment accounts.
Investment accounts at BB&T?
They're actually with a subsidiary, I think it's Sterling Investments, Sterling Capital Services.
That's a retirement subsidiary, a retirement investing subsidiary of BB&T?
I'm not exactly sure what the relationship is between the two. I think BB&T owns Sterling. I'm not sure.
And
It's the government investment wing of BB&T.
And we have a total of, what are the total funds? Is it somewhere in the neighborhood of 27 million?
Right now, we have about 7.5. Between the operating reserve and deposits. This example shows another 11 million going over to those investment accounts.
We have 7.5
right now.
Where is the 7.5?
Being held at Sterling.
At Sterling, okay. And is the 7.5 a part of the reserves? I recall a number of about $27 million.
$1 million of it is the customer deposit reserve. $6 million of it is associated with the operating reserve.
So I'm trying to have the numbers add up to 27 million. I'm trying to figure out where the full funds reside. And
that would be in the, if we go back to when we get to the financial statements for this month, that lists all of the cash that we have, and that's distributed over the operating cash in the bank, what the bond trustee holds, and the JWSC reserves and SPLOST monies. So these numbers that you're seeing here are just specific pieces of that 27 million total.
right, and so we would leave the other. You have 11 million here, so we would leave the other 16 million elsewhere.
We would leave. Yes, it would be. It would reside with BB&T Bank because the SPOS monies that we're taking in are going to be spent pretty quickly. And then the operating cash that we have is just normal month-to-month cash expenditures. We possibly could put more of our customer monies held for customer deposits into an investment. What else other monies we have? And we need to keep some portion of the R&R reserve and the CIF reserves in cash to pay current expenditures.
So that's 16 million, 27 million minus 11, the other 16 million that would remain at BB&T because of float of some sort. What interest rate is it earning?
The overall rate is, I think it's 1.68 cumulative rate. You know, one is earning 1.653, one is earning 1.718.
So we have 16 million earning in the 1.6 to 7 range.
No, we have 7.5. in
7.5.
in that range right now. We're proposing another 11 go into that.
Okay, so we have 7.5 plus 11 is 18.5. From 27,
Another 10, I'm sorry, not 11. No, it is 11.
It's 11.
okay, so then there's another 9 million somewhere.
The other 9 million, right now, there's about $3 million in the SPOS reserves, in the SPOS account.
Are those funds earning any interest?
They're earning day-to-day interest in those funds, but I'm not sure about whether we can actually invest those SPOS funds and if it's prudent to do so, because those are going to be expended very quickly. We do need to hold monies in cash to pay current draws on contracts and so on.
But all those other monies we won't need.
Any excess monies, one of the things that we'll need to do is go through and do a more detailed analysis of the monies that are sitting in the R&R reserve. For instance, when are those projects expected to start? What are the expected drawdowns on those projects? So that we know, is this money, of the $6 million we're asking to transfer, is 1 million of that gonna be, we're gonna have to pay out 1 million of that in the next 3 months or next 6 months? So we need to know that information to time the investments that are purchased within those portfolios.
How many days' money are you gonna keep?
Pardon me?
How many days' money are you gonna keep in the cash accounts?
In our normal cash accounts, or
30 days probably.
To write a check on?
that's usually about anywhere from 20 to 30 days cash on hand.
How quickly can we get money out of this?
We can get it out within a couple of days. They need time to sell sell a U.S. Treasury note. They need time to sell that and liquidate that and transfer it back to our cash accounts. But the risk there is that there's risk of losing money on selling those.
And we have a short-term credit account of some sort that we haven't tapped, that we can use?
We have a line of credit.
A line of credit, and how much is that one for?
It's a $5 million line of credit.
So even if we came up short, we have the ability to get up to 5 million
Yes, but
without
that does
selling the investments.
Yes, but that does come at a cost, and I think that the cost of using the line of credit is going to exceed the cost of losing interest on some money.
Paying the line of credit.
Yeah.
Right. You have to pay the line of credit.
So they're always going to charge us more in interest than we can earn in interest.
Well, they are if we're invested with them.
Yeah.
That's right. So what I was thinking, have we prepared a pro forma sources and uses statement to determine what the durations would need to be on these investments that we have available, so that we can actually set those durations and purchase investments for that cash flow time sequence?
We have a rough idea. certainly needs to be honed a bit, but we do have, the monies that we're asking to transfer right now wouldn't significantly impact those accounts.
This is an 11 million that you believe is just very safe that we won't touch.
For, probably for a year or more.
A year or more, so it can be invested long-term.
It could go out to something or to possibly a year or so as opposed to a 30, 60, or 90-day note.
I recall seeing something that I believe Charlie might know. I believe I got it from you, that had to do with the requirements of investing our funds, our reserves. And there was a statement in there about that we could not invest our funds with a single entity, that it had to be split in some way, so that we didn't have all of our monies in one spot. If we go with this plan, are we accommodating that requirement?
I went back and looked at that wording too, Commissioner. I think that it is a bit ambiguous, but I believe the intent of that was that we not have all of our money in a single investment vehicle, rather not. It's the difference between having the money with Sterling Investments or having all of the money in one investment vehicle with Sterling Investments. Right now, this $6 million fund, we have probably 30 or 40 separate different investments with that.
Commissioner Copeland, I was trying to find the email I sent you. I recall seeing it. Of course, I haven't looked at it since I sent it. So I couldn't quote it for you, right?
It was months ago,
Yes, sir.
several months ago. I mean, I remember looking at that and wondering the intent. Maybe the intent was that if you had a failure at a bank, for example, at an institution, that your monies would not be at risk because of that single institution's failure.
All of our monies have to be collateralized by the banks as part of Georgia law. So the banks have to literally hold investments backing up our cash. Of course, the investments that they buy to back up our cash balances are the same investments that we're purchasing through Sterling, U.S. Notes and agencies.
So this is an improvement on what we're currently doing, but what are the terms of this? How long are we locked in for if we do this?
How long before we?
How long are we locked in? I mean, this is better than what we have, but if we find something better tomorrow.
Oh, we can close these accounts at any time.
So this is not a long-term decision?
No.
This is something that if we find something better tomorrow or 2 weeks or 2 months from now, we can reverse this and continue to move forward with better stuff. What about our whole overall deal with BB&T? How long is that?
We've got one more year of that.
One more year being from January 1st or like?
From January 1st of 2019 to December 31st of 19.
So when are we going to start looking at that and restarting the process of competitive?
If the commission wants to change banks, that process needs to start as soon as it can possibly start, because it will take a considerable amount of time to transfer all of transferring the checking accounts is easy, but all of the lockbox operations, all of the credit card machines and so on will take a considerable amount of time in planning too.
I don't know that we necessarily want to change banks, but we definitely want to verify that we're getting the best banking deal out there. So, I mean, I think we need to go through the competitive process and look at the banks.
That process will need to start very shortly after the first of the year.
And now this analysis assumes that we no longer go with essentially the free banking concept and that we start paying a fee for services?
Yes, sir.
And what is that fee?
It's listed on here. It's, in this example, it was about $7,200 for the month. Of course, that varies based on the activity, how many people send in their payments through the lockbox, and how much we have on deposit on an average basis with the bank. So this is just a static example. These numbers change every day.
And it does vary based on the level of deposit. So if we were to take these monies and put them elsewhere, would we still be looking at a $7,000 a month fee?
Yes, if
These
we-
don't count towards
If we
on
took
deposit.
If we took these and moved them to a Charles Schwab account, we would incur the extra $7,200 a month.
I thought that was interesting. I remember the example you sent in an email some number of months back, and the bank statement did show their fee based on the amount of deposit.
The
And I
earning-
thought,
yes,
what if
the-
our deposit went to zero, would our fee be free?
Yes, the account analysis earnings are based on the amount of deposits that we have with the bank. The fees are based on the fee schedule that was quoted when we selected BB&T for our banking services several years ago now.
Okay. I think as long as we have the ability to move this money, then it's fine. It's better than what we have. If we do move this money, do we have some sort of a penalty we have to pay to take the money out?
From the bank, or from moving it out of the existing accounts?
No,
penalty.
moving it out of this RIS investment.
3 months from now, we find a better deal, we're gonna get penalized for moving
Do
it.
we have a duration that
But we
we
move
lock
within-
in?
within the
There's not
bank,
a-
though.
There's not a penalty, there would be some fees incurred for them selling those investments on our behalf, liquidating and them transferring the cash over. I don't believe there are any early termination fees or anything like that.
What is their transaction fee?
I don't know off the top of my head, Commissioner.
Okay.
I guess in a nutshell, I was hoping for a little bit more than this, but I mean, I know we've been talking about it for a while, I was hoping for a little bit
Well,
more, but I do think it's better than nothing. I mean, we ought to,
Well, it's a
Well, follow.
first step.
right, yeah, I mean, I think we ought to
Yeah, so
get moving to get something, but I mean, I would like for us to continue to pursue this. I don't think that we drop it just because we made some positive.
And as Commissioner Elliott said, this is a first step to put some monies in there. We do have a lot of refinement that we need to do in terms of the cash flows because these monies are used for construction projects. We need to do more fine tuning on when that cash is actually going to be necessary and ladder the investments to meet those cash needs.
One quick comment, Mr. Chairman. I did talk, per Mr. Browning's recommendation, I spoke with Ms. Miller over at the county about how they invested their funds. In terms of the things where you're investing public funds, there's some pretty strict restrictions about the kinds of instruments you can put it into. T-bills and money market accounts, those kind of things. We're not going to make the big investments that we could do if we were doing it for a private entity. Just FYI, as I looked at it, I checked it over myself. The best rates I could get, and this wasn't BB&T, for a 12 months CD was like 2.25 or 2.5.
I believe.
We're not going to get, 5 or 10% type returns on the money. We'll get better than sitting it in a checking account and the kind of interest you get there, but just, it won't be.
Well, I think the key thing here is that we don't get feed to death,
Yeah.
and what we think we're gonna get
Yeah.
is eaten up in fee differentials. So, it's a first step, in my opinion.
I'll dig up the fee schedule that was presented with the original proposals.
Well, yeah, we need to look at that, and you need to report on it as part of the financial report each month, so that the commission is aware of how much we're earning and how much, the fees are. Because I don't think we want to get into a situation where we didn't have very many fees to where the amount of fees we're now paying is eating up all the interest we're earning. kind of behooves the bank to do it that way.
Yeah, I would like to see us dealing with more money than 11 million. This is a great start. And in addition, I understand from what Jimmy had to say that 2.5% maybe is the best we can do in this kind of a situation. You're showing here 1.653 as an example percent, where in our previous discussion with the auditor who was talking about our pension fund, which is also very regulated, they were using 7.5%. And see, that was the point I was making there, that you're using a 7.5% rate to figure out how much we need to put in, but the market's not paying that. So we're underfunded, I think, in the pension plan.
Yes, we are.
Here we're talking about 1.6, which is a far cry from 7.5.
You want to make a motion?
Well, one comment about this is the $18 million, $18,000 a month. Shoot, that'll pay back $6 million of our GFA loan, just the interest we're getting. That'd be pretty good, eh?
I'll make a motion that we're ready for one. I move that the Joint Water Sewer Commission authorize the chairman, vice chairman, executive director, and director of finance to be authorized to execute the necessary documents to establish investment management custody fee agreements with BB&T Retirements and Institutional Services for investment of funds held for customer deposits and in the operating reserve of the Joint Water Sewer Commission.
Second.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand. Motion is carried. 7-0. Okay. Workers' compensation renewal.
Good afternoon. I'm Jarrett Bridges from Turner and Associates, and we're the broker on the workers' comp plan. Jeffrey Singletary from Teamwork Services, who's involved with claim management, is here as well. And you guys will see a marketing analysis for our efforts this year. We went out to 16 different insurance companies. Out of those 16, 6 gave us workers' compensation indications, and 4 of those 6 gave firm numbers. As you'll see, the low bid this year was Zenith Insurance Company. They've been the insurance workers' comp provider dating back to, I believe, 2009. And their renewal this year is a reduction of $32,975. That is a 11.61% decrease in workers' comp expense for the JWSC.
And that's the recommendation, is that who we go through.
Yeah, and I'll say Zenith has been very involved here. They've been here probably 4 to 5 times a year with Jeffrey on site, working with y'all's teammates, identifying risks, issues, exposures, making recommendations. Also, every year in January, they provide defensive driver training free of charge, which can be an expense between $5,000 to $8,000 per class. So they're bringing value outside of just management of the workers' comp claims, and those defensive driver classes should be helping your auto insurance too.
Do they also have other safety management classes that are available?
I believe they have an online portal that is available. Jeffrey, have you had any other experience with that?
Mainly it is the online portal, and as he said, Mike Rippenhoff comes by, tries to make it every quarter to come around, but as far as them actually sending a team in to do a class themselves, we haven't ever had that done except for the defensive driving, but they do have the online portal that we can use free of charge. But also, as he said, with their claims, they have been with us since our 2nd year, and they've been here the whole duration that I've been at Teamwork, which is 7 years. And we have over 70 clients, and I work with about 20 different carriers, and their customer service is by far the best. I mean, when I have a claim, I know exactly who to call. It's one person for medical only, and if it looks like it's going to go up the ladder and be an indemnity claim, then I know to call Dawn. We talk before she even gets it through the online system, and they're always right there on the spot, and that's hard to find with other carriers.
That NCCI experience mod,
Yes, sir.
it went down to
It did.
.96 from 1.12?
Yes, sir.
And does that include the experience of 2018?
No, sir. There's a 1-year buffer.
There's
So
a
it-
one-year
it
buffer,
takes
okay. So we
and that's
can
one
expect
thing
it to go up next year.
We've got 13 claims reserved, total around 170 in losses this year. Out of that 170, I believe it's probably 50,000 has been paid out in claims. So it will, if those claims come to fruition and end up at 170, yes, it will bump back up in another year.
And this quote is an annual cost?
Annual expense based off the wages reported, yes, sir.
So we can, and so we're saving $32,000
To last year's rate
over
structure.
last year, so that's an indication of the value of a safety program.
Yes, sir.
Right there, it just turns right into dollars. We could have spent $32,000 in training to improve safety and had a break even, essentially. And we'll see that go up next year, we think.
Yes, sir. I think it will trend, depending on how the claims settle up. I mean, that's why they give you a 1-year buffer, because there's just no guarantee. A lot of these workers' comp carriers, depending on the injuries, will set reserves at a certain amount. The claim may never get to that point, but they're hedging their bet on what a back injury or whatever type of injury typically sits at. So that's how they identify that.
And we have two that do have a high reserve on them right now. One, the gentleman's back to work, regular duty. We're just waiting on the final stages of that to be paid out. So I expect probably 40 to 50,000 of that reserve to be wiped away when it's done. The other one is litigated, and in today's times, you never know what you're going to get there. But I do expect to not reach what they have it reserved at as well on that one. Don't hold me to that. That's just my opinion on it. But I think we'll see a better year than it looks at the reserved rates right now.
Yeah, the experience rating is computed over 3 years. So when we calculate this year in, it will be this year with the previous 2 years. Okay, so it just keeps moving. Drop 1 year off and add a year in.
Yeah, the tough part about the mod is one claim will sit with y'all for 3 years.
Yeah. I think it's, we can talk about where we're heading, and that's what we're talking about with this year's claims and all, but the fact that we don't factor that in yet, we look at where we've been over the previous 3 years, I think this is, these are good numbers for us to look at today. Hopefully, it won't be too far out of line next year, when we're talking about it, but, yeah, I think that's good, a drop of almost $33,000. So, and I will say, safety program is all important. Jarrett, I come from where we stress safety every day.
It's got to be in the culture.
Yeah, it was.
Stand down safety day's been great here. I mean, it is in the culture.
Yeah, it was part of our every day. We talked about it every day, so it's all important. So, yeah, thank you.
Somebody want to make a motion?
I move that the Brunswick-Glynn County Joint Water and Sewer Commission approve to award and execute a workers' compensation renewal to Zenith for 2019, the cost of $250,932.
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Motion is carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I will be brief and concise. This is to bring in some new infrastructure to the fold of the Joint Water and Sewer Commission. Glen Oaks subdivision is a single-family home development on St. Simon's Island. It's at 1317 Demery Road, just south of Sky Lane and north of Mallory. It's a development, 10 lots, residential lots, by Mr. Lance Toland of 1317 Demery LLC. There's some stats on there on what exactly is this development and the infrastructure is. It's 400 linear feet of water lines valued at $36,000, 700 linear feet of wastewater lines valued at about $52,000. There are some attachments that come along with this. There's the letter of intent, which at the beginning of a development project, the developer will submit this and let joint water know what he intends to do, he or she intends to do. There is the application for dedication of the water system, the infrastructure itself, next. There's the actual easement grant, which is included for your review as well. And there are the easement documents, the easement deeds, actual drawings or maps showing the graphical representation of any deeds or easements that are required. And then finally, on the very end, record drawings of the water and sewer system. So we know what the infrastructure looks like as it sits in the ground as built. And we track in planning and construction, we track projects through what we call milestones. This is in the dedication phase. In other words, it's met all the construction and testing requirements, all that. It's been deemed built to joint water sewer standards. This is the dedication application, easement deed. All those items are received. And this is the point at which we bring it to the board for consideration. Do also point out that this, if the board chooses to accept it, it begins a 2-year warranty period on the infrastructure. So once that happens, we set some work orders in our work order system to go back out at intervals after a year or so. And then before the sunset of the 2-year warranty, we'll go back out and do some TV work and go investigate and see if there's any issues along the way. And of course, if anything breaks along the way as well, the entity that's dedicating this to us is responsible for repairing up to that 2-year period. So.
I don't see the as-built drawings in my packet.
Oh, man. I apologize if those aren't included.
It has the easement, but it does not have the as-built drawings.
Yeah, I apologize. I may have been bragging that I've got it included in my packet that Miss Annette gave me, but I do have those for view if you'd like to see those. Shows the water and sewer. I was talking with Janice earlier, what documents are important for the board to see at these things, just to try to reduce the amount of paperwork. But if everyone would like to see everything, we can certainly
Well,
do that.
I think we need the as-built and an inspection report if we go out and inspect it to make sure that the as-built, that what we find on the ground conforms to what the as-built has. And somebody to sign off on that and say.
Correct.
That, I mean, I know we can't do anything about previous sins, but, I mean, where we didn't get good as-built and things like that, but going forward, I would think that it would be something that somebody in your office should sign off saying that I have checked the as-built and what I found on the ground is represented correctly.
Exactly, and you set me up to perfectly explain that. You'll see the 2 milestones on here, and that is final record drawings, which are one for water, one for sewer, have been completed, have been signed off by the developer, the engineer of record, our superintendent for water, our super for sewer as well, and that is in our possession, those final signed record drawings.
Okay, so your office is not gonna inspect it, is that what you're telling me?
We've inspected throughout the whole construction process.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right.
We are saying and signed off, everybody's signed off saying it's built right.
The other question I have is on the fair value of infrastructure. How was that determined?
The engineer of record, or typically the design engineer, the engineer of record provides that.
And we use that number for depreciation as far as our capital assets, right?
Correct.
Didn't we be checking that number to verify?
We check to see if it's reasonable.
We make a reasonable, we compare it to our,
We don't change it to the nearest dollar or anything. We check to see that it makes sense.
Should we not just have a standard price per linear foot for each size pipe? And I mean, they got linear feet in here. I mean, we do several of these. Is the price per linear foot standard across all of them? Or
we could, I don't.
Certain size pipes, obviously.
Yeah.
10 is going to be worth more than 2.
Being a private development, we had no control over the contract they had with their builder or construction company. We could set. I'm not sure. That may be a conversation we can have we set standardized pricing or something like that. Just to point out, this was not funded in any way by Joint Water and Sewer Commission. This was all private development, and the developer wishes to now turn over that infrastructure to us to own and maintain for perpetuity.
I just think that probably standard is a way to do it, but I think, we ought to know what the size of the pipe is. Do you have that on the record drawings? Is that where that is?
That's correct. That's
Okay,
correct.
well, it doesn't necessarily have to be on this, we just make sure we have it.
I may not have been clear on when I was saying reduction in paperwork. I meant, does the board wish to see water and sewer record drawings in their packets? We have that,
I think
certainly.
this one does.
Okay. Excellent. I'll try, Janice.
So the fair value of infrastructure was determined by Tidewater Engineering?
Correct. In
And
this
then-
case, yes, sir.
Okay.
Do they pay a fee based on that? Is there a permit fee based on the fair value of the, there's not, is there?
No, sir, it's not based on the fair
No
value.
county fee or anything?
It's a flat fee for, we have a fee schedule in planning and construction for the different review phases, different permit types and review phases. We do have a flat fee schedule for these. Now, they do, similar to your question, for construction inspection, there's a fee charge for that, and that's based upon linear feet. So some of the permit fees are based upon linear feet, some are flat fees.
I would just hate to think that we're putting a big number in there for infrastructure that we are going to be depreciating, and it increases our depreciation into a false number. So, I mean, it needs to be very reasonable, I think.
Well, on the water, $90 a linear foot. And that would be the material plus the labor.
So that's all appurtenances, fire hydrants, valves, services, et cetera. Yes, sir.
Well, so it's more than just line.
Correct. It's all appurtenances, yes.
400 feet's not going to have too many hydrants or valves, so.
Not in this case, no, sir. Right.
Is there a pump station associated with it?
No, sir, not with this. They're not dedicating a pump station to this.
Yeah, I don't want to belabor the point, and I don't think it matters much for today, but I just think, for standard, we ought to, we're depreciating 400 feet at one amount over here, and we're depreciating it over here at a totally separate amount just for standard. I just think, we ought to have some kind of consistent standard across the board that we apply for depreciation standards, et cetera.
The reason for the fair market value being stated on those dedication forms is that that's a reportable transaction, financial transaction, which fair market value should be between a willing seller, willing buyer, if you will, what's the actual fair market value of that, not, and how that's determined is anybody's guess. I'm guessing it could be standard cost.
Well,
There's a reason for it being stated at fair market value.
well, the wastewater line is $73 a foot on this. So is that,
It's force main. Well, yeah, half and half. It's, some portion of it's grinder mains, so 1.25 or 2 inch lines. So would be small, versus an 8-inch water main. So that is probably gonna show some of the difference, while the water main in this case is greater than, if that was gravity sewer, you'd probably see greater cost on the sewer.
Is there only one grinder pump or a lot of grind?
There's several in
Several.
the subdivision, yes. They couldn't extend all the way with gravity.
The engineer certification, I mean, he states that this is based on, fair value based on cost basis as of the date of the application. It's his professional evaluation of the cost of materials and installation of the water wastewater systems as constructed in accordance with the approved standards and specs. So he's doing it based on a cost basis as opposed to a buyer and a seller. It's just cost.
I'll make a motion.
okay?
Make a motion that the Brunswick-Glynn County Joint Water and Sewer Commission accept the on-site water system and on-site sewer system along with associated easements within Glen Oaks development as public infrastructure for ownership, operation, and maintenance.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand. The motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we're to the discussion portion of the agenda. First up is wastewater treatment plant flows.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Commissioners. We at this time of month. Again, we're gonna look at November flows for each plant. The data's all been collected and turned into EPD by the 15th of the month. And I think we fairly had a good average month, other than one or two discrepancies that were found in one of the floor meters. First and foremost, we have Academy Creek on the front page here. The effluent flow is 7.2, 53% of capacity. The influent concentration, as you can see, across the board, 7.6 pH, BOD 212 average, TSS 335. Ammonia's at 23.4 coming in, phosphorus 5.3. The effluent concentration, which we permitted on, is correspond to what we report. Press on with the BOD, we had an 8 and a TSS of a 12, about average for our particular plant. Removal efficiencies, moving on, is up in the high 90%. The rainfall, and we removed 88 dry tons of sludge from the plant that month. Which is quite a bit, so the guys been putting it out. Any questions about Academy Creek?
We have reuse water there, don't we?
Yes, sir, we do.
And the water meter monthly, is that reuse water? Or
No,
is that,
sir, that's drinking water.
What's that used for?
Just to run the plant, basically. The big house, so to speak. I mean, just average water use.
Would you say the big house?
Well, I mean,
That's being in building,
Yeah, that's
lab
okay.
buildings, all those offices.
Just curious, where does the sludge go?
It goes through public services and Broadbridge. Goes to landfill.
Was the dryer being used all that time too?
it's a combination of the dry and wet.
Okay.
We had some maintenance issues with
Yeah,
fire.
that's right. We have a contract in from Texas right now. The manufacturer of the dryer, they're working on it as we speak.
Yeah.
They should be finishing up today.
It's funny how that, the flow didn't go up there as much, but Dunbar went up a whole lot. I guess they had more rain over there for that.
Well, on Dunbar, I would say,
Yeah.
I highlighted the yellow on the influence. We had a calibration
Right.
issue with that flow meter. That number's not correct.
Yeah,
That's the number we got, but that number is not correct. We're recalibrating that flow meter.
As a matter of fact, we had it recalibrated on the 6th of December.
Yeah, so we've already had it done. It's just the number came in higher. So I wanted to highlight that we were doing that on there. So that's why the number was high.
And 65% capacity for the month. Well, I guess I should have changed that
No,
number.
that's 65 off the influence.
Right, okay,
Not on the influence.
right, that's right. pHs was good, average BOD went around 150, 143 actually, 131 on the TSS. Comparably, looking at what the influence is like versus the effluent, which is the reportable numbers, we did pretty good on the reportable numbers. We had a 1 BOD and a 3 TSS going out. Ammonia's, look like say we having some removal. And
phosphorus as well. Efficiency is always pretty good over there. Alvin and the crew does a real good job of monitoring that system. We didn't have very much sludge going out this time, 21 tons, that's dry tons. Water usage, 410.
Is the pH of these two plants, the influent pH, is it measured at the influent structure?
What was that, sir?
Influent pH, like in Academy Creek, where's that measured?
We measure at the influent, when we take the influent sample.
So it does not include Panova's influent?
No, we take a separate pH for Pinova. We take an
What is
influent
that? Is
on
that-
Pinova.
Is Panova low?
No, it's pretty good. It stays up around the 6-7 range, 8.
I will say, speaking of Pinova, if you look at the Academy report with the BOD being 50 or 60 parts higher than average, it's because Pinova had a bad day and somewhat caused that problem.
Moving on to Southport. November flows, you're right at average 356,000 gallons of effluent 357, 24% capacity.
I will point out here, if you see the highlighted areas on the rainfall, the National Weather Service rainfall gauge in this area was down the weekend of Thanksgiving. And so if you recall, Thanksgiving was a really wet weekend here. So those numbers for Southport are a little on the low side, because it was down from Wednesday to Sunday of Thanksgiving, and I think it rained every day.
Very
I would
unused
say
plant.
based on the rainfall and the way the weather's been, all three plants are working really good. I mean, in excess of 95% removal for everything. That's great.
This might be a silly question, but is there an opportunity to recycle the sludge in the farming industry?
There are some opportunities to do that. We've done that here in the past.
Yes.
It's more of the market's not always a huge thing, because there are restrictions to what you can do with it, things of that nature. And a lot of agricultural folks don't necessarily want to deal with the perceived liabilities that come with it. There's not perceived liabilities, but you hear you're putting out sludge and they kind of get nervous about it.
I mean, I know the little hometown I came from, we had a wastewater treatment plant that pumped the stuff out and irrigated,
Yep.
farmland with it, but I mean, that was the actual liquid, not the, there's a way to get rid of it for free versus paying somebody to take it off. Seems like it'd be worth exploring. I don't know what the value that we pay, but,
Did that in the past with the dry sludge. We had a guy had a soil amendment type setup, and just by giving it to us, it was saving us money, taking it to the landfill.
Right.
Saved quite a bit.
Is that something worth looking into again, or is that?
Well, we was actually trying to get him to service us again, but we had some difficulty in the past with the organization and him, so he decided he don't want to deal with us anymore.
If you look at his history too, we did composting years ago there and they couldn't get rid of it.
Right, couldn't
Nobody
get rid of
wanted it.
compost,
So,
There's a stigma associated with it.
Yeah, I tried to put some in my front yard, and the wife said, "Don't bring no more of that back here."
I'm from the chicken farm country. It smells like money to me.
There you go. There you go.
But I will say, we are exploring some options with trying to reduce our sludge hauling costs at the very minimum, if not changing where we're taking.
Trying to dry as much as possible, sure.
How's our odor control at these plants? Especially Academy Creek.
Academy Creek is, we use a fragrance, which actually masks the odor. But it's determined on what comes into the system, sir.
Has been any complaints lately?
None other than, we try to control it by just simply operating. If the head works is not, putting out that much of a foul or H2S, then we try to control it through digestion mixture and when we, control as far as when we turn it on and turn it off. You can get a really foul odor when we decant. We have to let it settle for like 24 hours so it can remove the water off the sludge. They thicken it up a little bit, but we try to make sure it ain't in the middle of the day when we turn that digester on. And hopefully nobody has their windows open in the middle of the night, because we do get some complaints sometimes of that as well.
How's our fast oil and grease program?
It's working pretty good. We're working well with P&D and trying to iron out some issues. Just having things intact when we get ready to set the grease trap up. But SP&M, they do a lot of pumping out of the lift stations as well. Just to enlighten you, we just had a situation out at exit 29 where somebody poured a bunch of oil into the system, and so far we done pulled out about 14 totes of oil. And this is something that somebody did in the middle of the night. We don't know. We're still investigating it right now.
Motor oil?
That's what it looks like. So.
And that came to Academy Creek?
No, that came to Southport.
Yeah.
Miss Angela has some suspicions of where that might be getting in at. There's some stub outs that are clearly accessible by some truck ruts.
Yeah, there's a lot of truck stops over there.
Right. So we did check all the truck stops and stuff, and they seem to be fine. So we think it's an illicit dump off of a stub out that's on a vacant lot.
And that's what we face with, more times than we want to be. Again, even when we're doing construction here and there, we have some situations where we might also phosphorus or whatever that we may be testing. We have a differential in the sample, and a lot of times we don't know what the construction is going on. We're trying to work together with SP&M to make sure we understand what's going on out there in the field, so we can, I try to identify these things without getting a shock to our system. So we're working pretty good with that.
I will say with the FOG program, you asked questions. I actually met with Ms. Walker yesterday. She wants to try to, apparently in the past she did this, and I think it's a good idea, make presentations to school assemblies and things of that nature, because the vast majority of our grease problems don't come from commercial restaurants or anything like that. They do use a lot of grease, but they have grease traps that capture the vast majority of that. And most problems we have are from residential customers just pouring cooking grease down the drain. So
Plug up, stop up.
it will stop up in a hurry. So what she plans on doing, I think is a very good idea, is going to the schools, passing out information to the schools, and then the kids go home and, harass their parents about it.
I think I saw some photos that was posted one weekend recently about an incident that happened at Southport. I think it was Southport, where some items got into the system and just pretty much shut the plant down. And it was kind of an all hands on deck. I don't know if it shut the complete system down, but had to get down and do some removing of some items that shouldn't have never been put in the sewer system. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it was a couple weeks ago.
That was on Dunbar, they had grease.
What?
Grease from,
Is that where it was, Dunbar?
So you do have people that, back up in these small residential neighborhoods and pop manholes and just dump whatever they want into it. And you have to take care of it, but kind of hard to catch them sometimes.
You say you catch them or you catch it?
You catch both, hopefully.
Okay.
Sometimes it can be a result of a septic tank truck that don't want to pay his bills, so he finds somewhere else to dump it.
Yeah. I think the picture showed, wasn't anything that was a bad reflection on joint water sewer and our employees. If anything, it was a testament to how they can get in there in a situation that somebody sent downstream should have never been sent downstream. They had to deal with it, and they got in there and dealt with it, and it was from the pictures, it was not a pretty sight. What the employees were going down into and working on and cleaning up. And so.
Yes, sometimes a lot of that has to be hands-on.
Yeah. Oh, this was hands-on.
Really?
They have gloves.
Okay, anything else?
No, sir, that's it.
Thank you very much. Okay, lift station 4003 engineering RFP criteria. Mr. Junkin.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, in discussions we've had, Since the first time we went out for RFPs on the engineering selection at 4003, we talked about the criteria. The first time we came back with a recommendation on an engineer, we had some discussions about what we didn't have in our criteria. We went back and made an effort to adjust those per the discussions we had with some of the commissioners and plug that in. This last commission meeting, we had yet another discussion about what we ultimately plugged in so that all commissioners would understand what we were doing. And I've done my best to take the information that I got loosely, and unfortunately we didn't come to a conclusion on it, but I wanted to go over what we're looking at as a basis of what we heard in the last commission meeting. The one thing that we did change, we went in and instead of having 15 points on our local, we put in for 5 points, and instead of having 60 miles, we put in for 100 miles, which covers the majority of the engineers that we've typically done business with in the local areas from north and south of us. The other thing we did, we left the fees weighted the same at 20 points. We've got the recently completed projects weighted at, let's see, make sure I got it right. Recently completed projects weighted at 30 points, general experience of the firm at 10 points, collective experience of the firm at 20 points, and then let's see, the project approach, cost considerations, timeline, 15 points. Total points of 100 points. That includes the 5 points we put in there for local consideration. That's kind of the gist of what I thought I heard as I listened to the various conversations that were going on when we talked about it last time. If we can modify what we've got going out. We've left it like it was going out to the in the most recent RFP. This would be a change from that based on the changes I just called out. It does take a little bit lighter weighting on the local piece of it, which is what I thought I heard. And we just shifted that weighting, the additional weighting back up towards the recently completed projects, essentially. We want to make sure if they've done good work, we'll be able to check references and find out for sure that they do good work relevant to what we're trying to get done. If the commissioners don't mind, don't have any other issues, want to discuss this, we'll go back and reissue these modified criteria to the folks that showed up for our pre-submission meeting this week.
And how many firms?
We had 12.
Were they some of the same ones that?
It was some of the same ones and a few new ones, and then a few that came before didn't come this year. So.
Yeah, we had
Okay.
3 that
So
didn't show up.
they have everything, and this is just gonna be like an amendment to it?
Right,
And
yeah.
we indicated in the pre-proposal meeting that this criteria, it was probably going to change, and what we told them is we would issue an addendum telling them what the final criteria was.
When's-
Hopefully by tomorrow,
When are the proposals due?
mid-January. So
Mid-January, okay.
that's what we wanted to do, is they came, they have interest, before they put too much work into a proposal, if there's something in that weighting that might not make it favorable for them, that they know that.
How many did you say it was?
12.
Well, approximately how many of them fall into that 100-mile local? Just approximately.
I would say off
Wow.
the top of my head, the vast majority of them.
Yeah, 9 or
would
10
be.
of them.
And what 100 miles does, just so you know, it helps us capture the Jacksonville market
Right.
and the Savannah market.
How many of them in Glenn County?
3 or 4. 3 or 4, yeah.
Okay. Is there any other discussion?
I think it's good.
Okay. We'll move on.
Thanks, sir.
Okay, next item for discussion, Commissioner Harvey is going to talk about studies to review growth projections for North Mainland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commissioners. I put this item on the agenda because I just thought that I know we failed to discuss this issue as we're coming up in our other previous meeting, and I felt that maybe should be some type of discussion. I voiced my opinion about our trunk lines being so long, and that I actually thought that I would get a hotel and a conference center that would be using up some of Academy Creek, capacity, but that didn't happen, so I won't have to worry about that part. But really, I felt that that as we move forward in the future, that there would be the way Glynn County is projected to increase, and with trade winds happening too, that those trunk lines we're gonna end up over capacity at Academy Creek, and we should at least look at the possibility of another treatment plant on the north end of Glynn County. That was my reason for bringing it up. If people feel that we are we can sustain what we got, then so be it. But I, for one, don't think all the trunk lines should be coming from North Glynn County all the way all the way down and pumped down to Academy Creek in the city. Plus, we plan on building up Liberty Harbor, which is going to be, it's going to take up quite a bit when we start building that up. That's going to go up to Academy Creek too. So eventually, we're just going to have one treatment plant for the whole mainland other than the Southport, and it's going to become an issue. If you're looking out for the future. If we just looking where we are today, I'm pretty sure it wouldn't be any problem, but future plans for Glynn County is going to grow. And with the spaceport coming in Camden County, it's going to grow. So it's going to be, we need, I feel, to not have our trunk lines, our lines so far away traveling. Even though stuff runs downhill, I know, but still, I would like for it to pump uphill too if we need to.
I agree with Commissioner Harvey that, and of course, I made a presentation, I think in September. And I think we need to have staff tell us how much capacity we have coming around on the east side that we spent $3.5 million for, and then how much capacity we're gonna have coming around the west side that we're spending about $13 million for. Because we've got waste load allocations up there into the Altamaha River. And the site, we need to start thinking about that, and I think we need to at least put out an RFP for some kind of study. I know there's one firm that's done a lot of studies on it, did anti-degradation analysis and did the master plan, so they're very familiar with a lot of this. I don't think the study should cost over $50,000. And instead of just talking about it and keep on talking about it, is have a feasibility study made on it, and perhaps have a tentative site or several sites to talk about, so that we can think about this. It might be 10 years in the future, but it's something we definitely need to be moving toward, or at least look into, to make sure that we're using our customers' dollars in the best way possible.
Yeah, I don't disagree with using our customer dollars in the best way possible. And to that point, to talk about spending $50,000 on a study today, I think is a little premature. What I would suggest is we have Academy Creek operating around 50%. It's rated at, or I think we have, pardon me?
13.5 million a day.
We have 13.5 million that we can that's allowed for us to process in there, and we're 6 million? Is that
It's been running closer to 7 of late.
7 million? Okay, so that's a little over half. The other conference center looks like it's not coming. And I'm taking your words.
Okay.
But it looks like the conference center's not coming. Looks like Liberty Harbor is developing at the same speed it's developed ever since the first developer went in there, which is not very fast. I mean, I'm not as optimistic. I wish I was, but I'm just not that optimistic.
Yes.
When you take and look at Academy Creek and the capacity that it has left in it, even in light of the fact that as you move out to North Glynn County, it puts it more distant than right here in the city limits to treating waste. The city is pretty much developed. It's pretty much developed. You are never going to get in our lifetime any kind of development to put another 6-7 million gallons going to that plant. How do you best utilize that plant? I think these are the things we need to talk about here before we get into seriously spending $50,000, even if it's to see what we might need for a plant. I can tell you there may be a need for a plant one day, but before we study that for one day, 10 or 15 years down the road, if you just take your map out and look at it, where you have to pick up another 6 million gallons of waste to treat to maximize Glynn Academy, it's got to be way out in the unincorporated area. If that's where it's got to come from, you have got to look at your population growth forecast. Now, we use that in Glynn County. The state of Georgia uses the same numbers we use. And the reason we use the numbers is because of the state of Georgia. We use our numbers from DCA, Department of Community Affairs, state of Georgia. I serve on the State Water Commission. We do our forecasting out for 40 years. The models that we have used to forecast growth, of population growth, and the impact on the present water sources that we have identified today, which is groundwater, lakes, and rivers, those population forecasts for the entire coast has been revised down. That was last year that we revised those numbers down. I say we did. Our water plan was revised down, state of Georgia, along the coast because of the population growth. They had it wrong for so many years. We used those same numbers that they had wrong in Glynn County to forecast what we thought was going to happen on North Glynn, where we're talking about today. Those numbers hadn't come up, and I don't see any hint that they're going to come up. But all we have to do before we get out and get an independent company to come in here and help us spend $50,000, who is only one of the things that they're going to have to look at to forecast, and they're going to go to the Georgia Department of Community Affairs and get these numbers. They're going to get them. They can't make these numbers up.
That's true.
And that's where they're going to forecast. So if you want to see where it's going to go, and I called Pam Thompson. She can give you those numbers. She's got them every day. I called Pam Thompson recently and asked her about population growth out there. And she said it ain't there. She said it's not happening. But that was from my own curiosity about something else at the time. But that was just here in the last 10 days probably I talked with her. So I would suggest that maybe going forward, before we get into spending $50,000 on or whatever, $25,000 even. And I say that on a side note, we just had a discussion here about exit 29, doing some more sewer lines down there, increasing capacity at exit 29, and we had 2 proposals from Todd and staff. and we took on one, and we rejected the second one. Right down by a plant that's got plenty of capacity, and we rejected to handle what we could get there. We rejected it because it sounded like to me in the discussions, the return on investment for the one we agreed to was greater than the return on investment for the second one. Now, I can tell you that can probably come back by the center butt one day, because if it opens up for the amount of money we talked about increasing the capacity, in my view at that time, we should increase the capacity in those lines. And I didn't say it this way at that time when we talked about it, but we went through a big argument in Glynn County here 2 years ago about capacity issues.
Yes.
Getting wasted. We went through that. And we're spending money now from SPLOST to increase capacity and get it to Academy Creek because it can handle it. But it opened up Glynn County for growth and trade winds. Trade winds is going for grad certified because they have that increased capacity out there. But if you go back to exit 29, we didn't seem to listen to the community. And while we have an opportunity to increase capacity and just let it be there, we don't have to go back one day. We don't have to get caught with our britches down at a little cost compared to what we're talking about spending maybe up to $50,000 to do a wastewater treatment plant where we're not lacking in capacity. But
Well,
anyhow, all I'm saying is, I think we missed a boat. We missed an opportunity to establish capacity in our sewer lines. We have it in the plant down there. It would set that area up where we don't have to go back and deal with it for a long time. Developers can show up and we're not put on the hot seat because we don't have capacity. We should have done that. I wish we could go back and revisit that and do that. And but to go back to this thing on the North Glen, with 6 million, probably close to 6 million gallons of capacity at Academy Creek, with the work that's yet to be completed on the North Mainland back to Academy Creek, I would like to see us, I would recommend that what we do is get staff to look at, paint us a picture of our capacity that we have now, do their own forecasting, and maybe get Pam from the county, and I swear I won't talk to her and prep her, but get Pam to come over here and talk to y'all about population growth before we go out and spend some money. Just listen to her. I hadn't talked with her. She'd probably be glad to come over here and see what's on our minds, and then maybe go to the next step. If the commission still feels like it needs to go to the next step, would probably get you closer to spending money. I just think we need to be better informed, and that's my purpose for talking here. I just think we need to be better informed before we move to the next step of spending money. So
That's true, sir. I don't think, maybe we're not there about getting a feasibility study. And also, those numbers you talk about, they are forecast numbers. Forecast numbers just like the weather. You forecast it and you hope for rain when you're looking for sunshine or whatever. So basically, what I was talking about, is taking a look at, and your recommendation by having staff take a look at the capacity, like you just mentioned about, we should have done something that we didn't do before about capacity down at exit Southport, exit 29. So therefore, the same thing, same issue. We don't know exactly. We are forecasting maybe what's going to happen, the population increase, and who knows, we may have a population boom. I don't know. You don't know either. But it's best to have it to see where we are, or to at least talk about it, so we can make some type of decision going forward.
On the Southport issue, that we actually have is actually phase 1 and phase 2, and the phase 2 was putting in the line, if I'm correct, Todd, and that was going to be done after we started getting some of these tap fees to help pay for the cost of that. That's how that was structured. So
I just want to talk about it. I'm glad we're talking about it.
Not like we did not approve it. It's just going to be done as we get the tap fees.
Yeah, we just didn't do the second phase, but we'll get.
I want to add, I agree with you. We got to make informed decisions. And I think that's what this is about, is making informed decisions and giving us information we can make informed decisions of. Because it's not just capacity, it's what is the cheapest way to do that. Is it refurbing existing pipes, existing plant to get the, capacity we have, or is it to build something somewhere else? And I think that's exactly what the conversation is. If we have better information, we can make better decisions for the long term of Glynn County. And the second thing I wanted to add is, I don't want us to get stuck on the word North Mainland. I mean, to me, that's just nomenclature. Me personally, when I say North Mainland, I don't mean the concept of having something in a specific spot. I mean exactly what the second line item says, other potential sewer locations for Glynn County. So, just because we're not calling it North Mainland plant, it's the same concept. When I think of North Mainland, I'm thinking basically from the bridge north. Nothing down there around exit 29. So, if this thing is 5 miles from Altamaha, 2 miles from Altamaha, 5 miles west of 95 or east of 95, all that's irrelevant to the discussion of a feasibility study and if something is needed, and if so, where is it best needed? I don't want us to get too caught up on the nomenclature, which we did a couple of meetings ago, of saying, we're fixated on the North Mainland versus another location. To me, it's just another location somewhere in Glynn County to take load off of Academy Creek and to prevent us from adding infrastructure to get stuff to Academy Creek.
Yeah, and I agree with all that's been said, but I would like to make a point that I don't think to do an economic analysis of this alternative, we're not just talking about population growth. That's not the only driver for this option. There are other things, and I just jotted down a few items that should be considered. And we have the population growth, we have the appropriate use of our existing capacity. We have technological concerns that need to be considered. We have environmental concerns, odor control, length of a run. If we have a plant up in that area, we may find, we're talking about populations not growing up there. Well, let's open that area up and put the sewage capacity in there potentially, and we may see that we stimulate growth in that area. And all the growth is being pushed over to the island because of, or maybe because of capacity issues, limiting capacity issues, because they have to put in septic up there. All of a sudden we open that area up, we may find that some of that capacity, that growth starts moving up into that end of the county. We have, so those are economic issues. We have for the county. We have the future use of the property in the city to think about. We have plant life. Existing plant life, the life of the existing plant, Academy Creek. What's it going to cost to make it the plant that provides the capacity for all the growth that comes out of the North Mainland? And so we need to do a full life cycle analysis considering all these issues to make sure that the money we're talking about spending now, we're talking about spending millions of dollars, $10 million in one that we're talking about for.
Can't avoid that.
What is the best utilization of that money and the other monies if you had a plant in North Mainland that money was oriented towards to divert capacity versus what we're dealing with as our existing case? That would be, and then the operating costs. We want to look at the operating cost of the two different alternatives, and you bring all that in there and you do a full-blown life cycle net present value analysis to determine what's the best alternative, what's the best use of this money, and all these other things that we talked about, that I mentioned. So that's the reason I want to see a small study that puts the numbers on paper, puts the issues on paper, and then we know which is the best way to go.
Mr. Executive Director, how much of this can we do? How much of the information can we compile?
When I looked at it, and I looked at it the other day after discussions with you, Mr. Mayor, and we can put together what are the necessary things we gotta do today. We can give a ballpark of what the changes we'll have to make when the environmental or the permitting issues occur at Academy Creek.
Okay.
We can put together, I think, some, kind of broad-based estimates of what the new plant, the infrastructure to support that plant would be, turning lines around, whatever else that we might do. So we can do some of the economics there. I believe we could do possibly a analysis of a projected O&M costs under the various scenarios that you might have. It ain't gonna happen as fast as.
You think you can get that done within the next, like, 2 months, maybe?
I'm not gonna absolutely say that.
Jimmy, what you have to do, in my opinion, too,
There's a lot
is
of
you
numbers still to be refined.
you have to calculate what we're going to continue to have to spend at Academy Creek. We got to know that we're not going to shut Academy Creek down.
Oh, we can't do that.
You're not going to do that.
No,
I mean, if you think,
I don't think anybody.
listen, if you think that you're going to build a new plant in Glynn County, so you're not sending waste to Academy Creek for some reason that someone thinks we shouldn't send it there, well, we have, but you're not going to shut Academy Creek down. We are going to continue to have to operate it. We got to keep it going, and we're going to have to make improvements to it. We're going to have to make mechanical upgrades in it. We're going to have to make electrical upgrades in it. So we're going to, because you can't shut it down one day and send it to we're going to just shut that thing down and build a North Mainland super.
No, no one's saying that.
See, no, I know that, but what I'm getting at is you are not going to, and so, you got to be darn sure if you build another plant that you understand you're not going to get a penny of savings out of Academy Creek.
Well,
We don't know there's not many.
we're not saying do away with Academy Creek. We've already authorized, and we're applying for GFA loan for $10 million. And then we have the $1.5 million from the last meeting. If the commission approves it, then we'll have $11.5 million. And those are gonna be for immediate improvements to Academy Creek.
Yeah.
And it's gonna make it, it's gonna really get it up in good shape.
Well, I agree it's gonna help a lot down there. But again, we have that liability of operating that plant for decades. The city and all of the mainland right now that's tied on to it, not counting Southport area, depends on that plant. So I think that we should get an assessment from staff first, and we should hear some presentation on growth, so we know exactly. I think it's going to be very important to hear that. And once we get the assessment from staff, and then see where we want to go with it. And if that takes a couple of months.
that's what I posed, sir.
Yeah,
exactly. That makes sense.
I mean, if that takes 3 or 4 months, what's 3 or 4 months?
A third-party outsourced firm to come in, an engineering firm, just to look at the assessment. I mean, after all, we have somebody do our rate study. I think it's a big enough picture to have somebody come in, dedicate the resources, look at it, and then, if nobody else wants to do that, then let's just vote it down and not do that. But I think we should put it to a vote at some point in the not-so-distant future to see if there's an appetite at the commission to have a third-party engineering firm come in and just do a reasonable assessment. I'm talking about some napkin math here, not a, 2-year study of just some napkin math to give us some guidance, or whether we, need to, whether it's a better financial option. And it may not be, and if it's not, then you're right, and we can put this to rest. But you might be wrong. It might be that we are able to save some refurbishments.
Yeah.
And, there's obviously a difference of opinion on some of us, so let's.
I think there's a load of information we can get before I think we should hear it. I think we should hear that information, see where we are today. For instance, we have 3 plants. How many accounts do we have?
How many what?
How many customer accounts do we have?
Around 30,000.
Yeah.
Huh? 30?
28 or
30,000.
30,000.
All right. We have 3 plants.
Sewer accounts.
Yeah, we have 3 plants operating now, taking care of 30,000 customers. We built a fourth plant, we're gonna have 4 plants on average serving 7,500 customers. That's what we're gonna have. Some gonna have a bit more than that, some gonna have less than that. But we're gonna have 4, we're talking about taking a big step here to spend money on getting it where we can have 4 plants that are gonna serve on average 7,500 customers.
That is if everything stays the same. And I know you're taking a snapshot in time as to everything will stay the same. You know, we're really trying to get those people who are on septic tanks now to become customers. So we're doing that. So that's going to increase, that's going to make that capacity go even lower. But I believe as we move forward.
Tell you what you do.
What, sir?
If you think, if that helps you move forward with building another wastewater treatment plant, because why don't you wait till we get that study done and let's see how many of these people.
Well, I asked in the beginning.
I'm telling you, you wait until you get.
Well, no, I don't want. No.
Reach out and find all these.
If I wait that long, I'll be dead by the time I get that.
We just had a mini study done on St. Simon's Island over at Etworth, and those people jumped right all over it when they found out what was going on.
That's what I said. No, let me back up on that now. Okay.
I think we
you know, pie in the sky.
Excuse me. I think we do have kind of a split thought process here. And I just like to interject that before we do anything, I would like to get the stuff that's free, which would be the population projections, on a map and look at them. Yeah. Get whatever we can get free.
If the chairman and the rest of the commission will allow me, I'll follow up with Ms. Thompson and see if we can get some data, see if we can get them to come in and give us maybe like a 5-minute overview of where things are. If y'all need more time, we'll schedule more, get more facts and details, but I could track that down.
Okay. I'd also like you to add in to what we look at, potential growth in Camden County because of the spaceport. Is that a real thing? I don't know if somebody's looked at it that way.
Well, I'd also like for the director to talk about any conversations he might have had with potential developers up there too, with interest anybody, because I'm sure that there's somebody has been looking up there that would probably like to have something if there's a plant there. Or else and I'm sure that those conversations have been taking place and we're just not privy to those.
Pam may be more knowledgeable than we are about who's scouting the woods up there.
Well, she may be too, and also, you know, Department of Community Affairs, Community Development can give you that same information. Plus, you know, I went to a meeting, it's been about a year ago. They talked about the projections happening with Georgia, how it's going to increase in population. If we take a look at, if they do the census from, I'm pretty sure the census is going to tell us something different. We got a census coming up here in 2 years. 2 years. So we'll see how that brings out. And if we didn't move anywhere, then we don't need another treatment plant.
And I think we need to understand what the cost for the feasibility study is. I mean, it might be $250,000, it might only be $20,000. I mean, we need to understand what that is. I'm making up numbers, obviously. But I mean, that's the point, is we're making up numbers. We're all
yes,
making up
and
numbers.
you're right. And as
we don't know anything. We're just, guessing what we.
As Commissioner Brown has said, you know, why spend a lot of money for nothing? You don't want to do that.
It wouldn't cost anything to ask somebody, though, what would you charge to do a feasibility study?
Well,
I think we ought to ask some people, what would you charge us for this study that we're asking? But at some point, we do need to put this to the vote.
Yes, we need to put it to bed. You're right. But I think if we get everybody, our staff to do what they can do first of all.
One of the things that the commission is going to have to wrestle with next year is determining whether we want to do a update to our master plan, because AWWA basically recommends every 5 years a look at your master plan, and we're coming up on the 5th year in 2021. Since we got it in August, I mean, that's when we'd like to have it. So it's something we need to look at, and that feasibility may be a portion of an overall master plan of where we should go based on growth and projection, like what we had in the last master plan. But I think that the population projections were a little bit excessive.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that, you know, if we move to paid study and all, that, I'm in agreement with Commissioner Stevens. Let the study determine where that plan ought to go.
Yeah.
You know, the last thing that usually works is when you get government involved and saying, the elected folks or the poor folks saying, well, we need to put it right there. I mean, they usually get it wrong. So,
Yes, sir.
so I think you're very wise, Commissioner Stevens. You know, let somebody else decide where a future plant, when needed, where it ought to go.
Yeah, a conference on it too.
Yeah.
We need to kind of move on. I think we're at a point now where we need the financials.
Well, we're not, Mr. Chairman,
Social
we're
media?
passing over that.
Social
media
media.
standards.
Oh, social media, I'm sorry.
Yeah. You're pretty good.
Yeah, let's do the social media. We got 2 things left to do. So it's,
Thanks, Mike.
sorry.
Based on the changes that were, or the discussion we had at the last meeting, we went back and took those comments into consideration. We also enlisted the help of our attorney, the commission's attorney, to make sure that we weren't making any changes or leaving anything in the standards that would impact anybody's First Amendment rights. We went through and we made sure that we eliminated the verbiage that did so, and we also went back, as I recall from the discussion, Jay was apt in saying that our intent was to eliminate things that would not be suitable to represent us out in the social media world. But the comment came back because of a line that I overlooked in the write-up that basically said you can use your social media at work. We've gone back and eliminated that and basically written in the standards that it's got to be your time. We're still giving them guidelines for when you do have the social media device or work in your own private social media account. You've got certain guidelines that we would expect you to uphold. And there are disciplinary actions that would occur if you overlook issues of, your responsibilities to do your job at work and save the social media activities for your own personal time. So we've gone back and addressed those things, which again, these are standards that are built around existing policy that already covers the issues of, the way we conduct ourselves when we get on social media and upload the kind of content we might upload and that kind of thing. But in terms of overall expectations from our employees when they use social media, I think this goes back and addresses the concerns that I heard the commission raise at the last meeting. I think we're going to get both the when you use it and how you use it addressed with this standards of practice right up here. So that's where we're at. Just wanted to pass that along. If we've got issues we need to pursue beyond this, after you guys have time to review this, be glad to.
Well, since I spoke out so forcefully at the last meeting about this thing, this looks like a big improvement. And I do want to say that I have no one in particular that I would want to report to management here that I've seen on social media abusing it. And I've even mentioned to Jimmy in passing one day that I don't want him going looking for anybody on social media. My concern is if somebody's working for JWSC and using kind of more or less personal social media during working hours, and the general public sees that and they think that's what's going on, and it could look bad on us. And it's hard for us to explain to people that's paying the bills down here, that someone looks like they're on social media and they're getting paid. It's during their work time. First thing they think of, well, they must not be needed that. They must not have that much work to do. And, or whatever they think that's not the best thoughts in the world and makes a good reflection on JWSC. So that's what I'm trying to avoid. And I think this will do that. And it will give management something to back them up if they have to bring someone in and talk to them. I don't necessarily, I wouldn't want a policy where you automatically fire somebody if you catch them on there. If you got a good employee, I'm telling you, there's a learning curve every job you get in, and we don't want to get into running good employees off every time we find something that we think we got half a reason to run them off, because then I think we lessen the quality of what we're trying to deliver to the public, and we got to hire some other people. You don't know if you can get somebody as good. You get in all that. I don't want to get in all that. You know, if we can recalibrate, you know, sometimes sit down and talk and say, you know, we shouldn't be doing this, and here's the reason why we think you shouldn't be doing it. Then we move on and things work out. That's what I want to see. So I like what I see here today.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown.
Yeah, I mean, at first glance, I think this is well done and it's concise. I mean, I think that's one thing that's important, is it's concise. I think we should consider adding to the very last part, examples of nonconformity. I think that, you know, our employees, our team members at times have very good intentions, but I think at times it's easy to, well, to your point, I mean, if you're using it on break and somebody in the public member sees it, I have been trapped by social media before by thinking I'm gonna be on there for 30 seconds. The next thing you know, 15 minutes later, I'm still looking at something, because there's just so much out there. And I think you even mentioned something about that in here. So, I mean, it is easy to get caught up by it, but it's also easy to get caught up in political arguments and frankly, arguments directly about joint water sewer. So I say that to say, I mean, I think we need something that just references, you know, we don't want our team members aggressively arguing with the community about us, even if it's in defense of us. But I think this is well done, it's concise, and I think it's.
And to that end, and I think this is maybe something that Mr. Dormany can respond to, your request. I gave that consideration and thought. To the extent that we can tell them on their own time, on their own account, don't, you know, you can't get out there and say whatever it is you want to say. We've given them guidelines of, you know, you want to say something, you want to be critical of us, or you want to be defensive of us. You make sure, or it's recommended, you separate yourself. This is my opinion when I upload it. I'm not sure, and Mr. Dormany, am I kind of limited in where I can draw the line as to what they do and say?
Yes, there's and this is a real hot button legal issue around the country, and there's a lot of First Amendment plaintiff lawyers that like to go around and look at people's policies and file legal actions against them. So curtailing what your employees say, even if it's about the JWSC, is difficult. There are other means to address that in the standards of practice outside of a social media policy. But the policy here does state to some extent that you know, there are certain individuals that are to speak on behalf of the JWSC, and if you're not one of them, you know, be careful representing yourself as speaking on behalf of the JWSC. That you can curtail, but you can't curtail, or you need to stay away from curtailing employees criticizing the JWSC. That can become problematic, and asking them not to speak on certain issues is certainly problematic.
Yeah, Charlie, that's probably true, and I don't disagree with any of that. If they're on their own time.
Yes, sir.
If they're on their own time.
That's true. Mm-hmm.
I think our concern, those I've heard talk about, employees that are on JWSC's time, it's not a part of their job to be on social media, whatever they're discussing, whether they're discussing Commissioner Browning and why they want him to go, or whatever, you know.
Yes, sir.
Whatever they're discussing.
I certainly.
I mean, that's what we're trying to address, because you know, people have. I mean, we hire people with. Hopefully, you guys are Jimmy and his staff are hiring people because they got work for them to do.
Oh, yeah.
Not hiring them because they got a social media, you know, some things they want to get on social media about, so.
And maybe a policy's not the way to address it, maybe it's just some kind of, just staff meetings, et cetera. But I remember reading something one time, and there was nobody in this room, so I'd like to think that it's probably somebody that wasn't authorized to, speak on this account. But somebody had mentioned on there the water bill was high, the water bill was ridiculous, and blah, blah, blah. And one of our team members went in, looked at the system, basically challenged, said, that's not what your water bill was, this was your water bill. And it was not somebody that I would assume that they were not authorized to do that. So we need a way to, somebody to say, look, we're not gonna actively engage the community, just because we happen to be right.
Right, and there is a provision in there about confidential, information. Where somewhere.
Yeah, there's just confidentiality policy.
Right.
If I support a bill is confidential or not, but anyhow.
Well,
But I think this is great. I mean, I think this is well done. I like it because I like how concise it is.
all right, sir. Thank you.
Okay, now we'll do the financials.
Commissioners, I just have a few comments on the financials for this month. Starting with the balance sheet, third line down, the accounts receivable. June 30th was 2.1 million, November 30th, 1.87 million. That's a net reduction of $240,000. But to call your attention to the allowance for bad debts over to the left of the page, went from 1.978 to 1.548. That's a reduction of $430,000, which is reflective of the accounts receivable being not as old as they had previously been, because there's a graduating scale for the estimated amount of bad debt. As the debt becomes more current, that scale, the amount of the receivables also goes down. The actual gross reduction in receivables for so far this year has been $670,000 when we factor out the change in the allowance for bad debt, which is about $135,000 a month reduction in total outstanding receivables. And the next item would be the restricted cash accounts. In particular, the JWSC reserves, capital reserves, and SPLOST monies. Those have all increased significantly so far this year. And when we look at the project report, it's because we haven't actually been having large cash outlays. That money is accumulating to complete projects. Next is the fixed assets net of depreciation. You'll see that's decreased by a little over $300,000. We're actually booking depreciation on a monthly basis, and we're catching that up now because that's one of the things that kind of stretches out the time frame for having the audit done. We've typically just reconciled fixed assets and depreciated them at the end of the year, so we're doing that throughout the year to expedite the year-end closing process. That's the extent of my comments on the balance sheet. Moving on to the next schedule is the supplemental schedule of cash balances. And this does have some information on the amounts invested in outside of BB&T Bank, and I'll be working on expanding this to show the interest earned on the investments and fees and so on, to give you more information on this page. Following that is the combined statement of revenues for the 5 months. You see we're still running ahead in total revenues over budget, and the amount charged to customers is about 8.7% over budget for the year so far. The operating expenses $1.35 million under budget, so we still are showing a net revenue of nearly $4 million so far this year, which does include SPOSS. Net operating revenues is about 2.15. We still do have a number of purchase orders outstanding. And following that is the report of overtime. These numbers, the year-to-date numbers in this are the budget as it existed. The amendments that were passed previously at this meeting will help correct some of those year-to-date or the variances between budget and year-to-date actuals. And finally is the project report. And here in the top section of this, the off towards the right is the expenditures for the year, which are the actual cash outlays for projects. That's the $135,000. That small number, 5 months into the year, is what's causing those reserve balances to keep climbing. But as you'll see down at the bottom of the page, we actually have balances to complete of $6.83 million, which would, in theory, bring that $9 million R&R reserve down to $2.3 million if all of that happened at one time. And these numbers of the 2.25 or 2.525 million in the capital reserve, 9.2 in the repair and replacement reserve, and the 5.7 in the capital improvement reserves. Those are the monies that we're talking about investing some of those monies until they're actually necessary for projects. That was kind of quick through there. I'm happy to answer any questions, or if you have any later.
The FEMA mitigation, is that the one that we applied for the grant for?
Yes.
You have to front all the money and then get reimbursed.
Do we know the status of that?
So we're getting close to the finalization of the final app. So we did the city app that got approved, and we're still working on the final app. Actually, I have a call with her after the first of the year. She got some feedback from GMA last week for some additional questions. We provided the info, so I think we're getting closer to what that final package is going to be. We're also kind of wondering how much longer before we kind of see some movement.
And the Magnolia Park water improvements, when's that, what's the schedule of that?
We're meeting next week with the city's engineer, EMC, to sit down with them, look at the preliminary design.
And the oxygen system rehab?
Bids are due the first or second week in January. What, you remember the exact date on that?
It's in the teens.
Second week of January, bids will be taken on that.
Because it sounds like we got some money we need to be spending on some construction projects.
We're about to start spending a lot of it.
Okay.
Unrelated to this exact conversation, but what is kind of our early next year calendar from a perspective of budgets coming up? We got the health insurance premiums. Remember last year, brand new on this, and they kind of all hit somewhere around the first of the year. What is our timetable for that stuff?
The budgeting process should be starting any time now. The division superintendents will be putting together their operating budgets. I haven't actually prepared their budget worksheets pending the adjustments that we're making today, so they're more accurate for them to work with. During that time, we'll also be planning any minor capital expenditures that we have due. Our health insurance renewal is March 15th, so that number probably won't be available until first part of March, but the commission was going to meet prior to that to go over the coverages and work with Teamwork Services and Katina Tyndall to look at coverages and possibly explore any options in that. That will need board commission commission action on that late February or first part of March.
Mr. Donaghy, could you, I know you put together a schedule that you shared with us.
Yes.
Would you
That was
circulate it?
on the commission schedule. It's also on the commission schedule for the budgeting.
And-
I forgot the exact, I don't remember the exact dates right now, but by the end of January, we should have the first rough draft of the operating budgets done. And then, by first part of April, or first of April, I believe, have, first round of reviews done and and first round of, rates estimations.
Well, I think we should have some, I mean, to your point about there'll be some rough draft budgets available. I think as we have drafts available, we should have conceptual conversations about those versus wait on the final draft, bring it in here, and then all of a sudden it's a time-sensitive thing to vote on. I mean, as you've got some documents ready, I think we should, start looking at them, having discussions about them, and be able to start planning ahead.
Our goal is to really have the budget pretty much all wrapped up by mid-April, which includes first drafts and staff run-throughs.
I guess what I'm asking is, as we got a late January draft, understanding it's not a final document, but I think we ought to have an opportunity to weigh in and to be involved in the conversation.
My recollection on the schedule was, part of it was staff was gonna put together some initial recommendations for big picture issues we had and that were gonna change what we do in the
Which were
draft
tied back
budget,
to the strategic
which we wanted to
business
discuss with you all to make sure we're tracking where you need us to track before we pursue some of these things. So you'll be getting some feedback before the initial draft comes out.
And certainly the feedback through the drafting process will certainly expedite the final approval of that budget.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, Mr. Junkin, you have any update?
A real short update today. Just a quick reminder that on the 22nd of January, we do have that open forum, Rise of Sea Level. Yours truly will be one of the panel members. If any of you would like to see what my thoughts are on the rise of sea level, I've got it kind of mapped out what my thoughts are. I will say that I think that it's kind of like, I think maybe the mayor's talked about projecting populations, projecting what's going to happen and when, and what the big steps are going to be will be very much contingent on how things shake out as they go. And some of this may be way out into the future, so it's crystal ball time for sure. The other thing I was going to mention today is that beginning with the calendar 2019, we will be kicking into gear our new initiatives from the strategic business plan. Some of that's already well underway, at least the first major initiative, that is setting a set of core values that we want our employees to follow to achieve what we think we ought to achieve. We've already done that. Mr. Burris is setting up meetings for us to go over the strategic business plan in a review form like we did in here with each of the staff. At that time, we'll be talking about our core values and the changes in expectations that they can see as we move forward. So here in the next 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to have some good discussions, I hope, positive engagement by all of our employees. And certainly, if any of you would like to attend some of that, please let me know. We'll make it available in the schedule.
Okay.
That's my wrap-up.
Okay. Let me ask a question. Do we need an executive session today? Okay, so Commissioner Cliff Adams has been with us for 4 years, and this is his last scheduled meeting.
Amen.
But he'll have to remain a commissioner until we swear in
Mr. Duncan in.
Mr. Duncan. So I want to express my deep appreciation for everything that Cliff has done. He's been very helpful to me the last 4 years. and I think to this commission. So, with that,
I appreciate it, I really do. The staff, I love the depth, they've helped me a lot, I've learned a lot. Still got a big curve to learn. I think Bob's gonna step in and, just keep going like you're going. And I wish you the best of luck. Have a Merry Christmas.
well, here's a hand for you. Is there anything else that anyone else would like to address?
I want to say Merry Christmas to everybody.
Okay.
I want to thank Ben and
Oh,
especially
yes.
your wife.
Yeah.
I know you helped her.
Nothing else? The meeting is adjourned.